Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call this Tampa City Council Workshop meeting to order. At this time, I yield to Councilmember Carlson for today's invocation.
This morning we have someone everybody knows, Pastor Frank Williams. Would you like to come on up?
It's live, it's just not appearing here.
TV network?
It is. You just haven't put it up on our screen. All right.
And Pastor Williams is the pastor of Paradise Missionary Baptist Church. So we will, let's all stand for the invocation and then for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Me that beautiful cross of the Jordan River he had when he was there in Israel. And I thank God for all of y'all. Just like I had told y'all before, I come up here before, I told you I'm praying for you all, and I pray to God that you all do likewise for me. Holy God, our Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior, God, we come to you, Father, asking you to please forgive us for all of our sin, all of our division and everything else about us, physically as well as spiritually. God, we love you, Father, and we thank you for this blessing that this brother gave me, this cross of Jesus Christ at the Jordan Road. I pray that you bless him in a mighty good way. And not only him, but bless each and every one of us in a mighty good way. Father, we love you. We love you, we love you, and we love you very, very much. Thank you for the blessing of another day. I'm 85 years old, and I got to give you all the praise and all the glory before you call me home. I'm very grateful, Father, for what you're doing in my life and what you're doing for me right now. I ask you, Father, to remember everyone here by name, by their position, bless them spiritually as well as physically. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen. Thank God.
I pledge allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we'll have roll call.
Carlson. Here. Hurtak.
Here.
Clendenin.
Here.
Henderson.
Present.
Viera. Miranda. Here. Maniscalco.
Here.
We have physical quorum.
All right. I know the meeting is, the feed is live, but on our screens and on the main screen up top, we don't see the meeting, but I don't know if T and I is working on it, but anyways, it is, the broadcast is live and it's showing. At this time, Mr. Shelby, do you need to go over any rules or anything before we go to public comment?
These are the public comment suggestion for the rules relating to general public comment. Members of the public are allowed a reasonable opportunity at the beginning of today's meeting to address any item on the agenda before City Council takes official action. This being a workshop, you also have the opportunity to talk after hearing the staff report and commenting before the city takes official action. City Council takes any action on the item. A 3-minute time limit applies to all speakers providing public comment. Speakers and members of the public are also reminded that they are to refrain from disruptive behavior, including making vulgar or threatening remarks or making or causing disruptive noises or sounds or displaying signs or graphics. Speakers are also reminded to refrain from launching personal attacks against any city official, staff member, or members of the public. The chair will rule out of order any person who speaks without being recognized or attempts to address the city council from outside the speaker area at the podium. Persons failing to comply with the council's rules may also be ruled out of order and at the discretion of the chair may be removed from the chambers for the remainder of today's meeting. And finally, council, you should refrain from engaging the speaker under public comment, and the public should be aware that the city council does not take questions or have a dialogue during general public comment. That is your opportunity to express your position. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a little housekeeping here. I have a memo received from Councilmember Carlson requesting item number 4 be continued to next Thursday's housing workshop. Yes, sir.
I spoke to Dr. Shivandu, and because of resources at USF that we need to rally, we're recommending moving it to August 31st. So I would like to move to continue item 4 to August 31st.
All right, we have a motion from Councilmember Carlson, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor? Aye. All right, I also have a memo from Kamaria Pettis-Mackle and Dana Crosby requesting item number 5 be continued to the April 25th workshop. We have motion from Councilmember Clendenin, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor? Aye. All right, and then finally, item number 6, there's a memo from Councilmember Clendenin requesting to remove item 6 from the agenda. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right, we have a motion from Councilmember Clendenin, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Could I just say on item number 5, and speaking of legal, there's at least one lawsuit against Indian Rocks Beach regarding this ordinance right now. And so the legal department, this is just for the public, the legal department would like us to wait until the lawsuit is concluded before we discuss it.
Okay, thank you very much. That clears up housekeeping, so we'll have just a few items on today's workshop. Now is time for general public comment. If anybody wishes to speak, please come up, state your name. You'll have 3 minutes. Yes, sir. Please state your name. Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Name is Daryl Heitch. Forgive my coffee.
Don't spill that skull.
All right, I won't spill it. Bayard Rustin was a gay civil rights leader back in the 60s. Bayard Rustin had a very good friend, Martin Luther King. These two men single-handedly, in 7 weeks, put together the world's most changing atmosphere when they put together the March on Washington. 2 men, one that was hiding and disguising his identity, and he was tucking behind, and metaphorically speaking, tucking behind corners because of the lifestyle that he lived as a gay male back in the 60s. And in the black community, that was a taboo, or in the world, in so many words, that was a taboo. But Bayard Rustin, a name that is often not even heard because Martin was the one who spoke of I Have a Dream, but Bayard actually wrote that message. Martin changed it, and the world looked at it from I Have a Dream. But these were 2 men who faced challenges. Bull Connor's water hoses and his dogs and all of the atrocities that was taking place. 2 men changed the world as we see it today. For the last 10 weeks, we've been coming down here talking about Resolution 568, bringing it in front of 7 individuals with high intellect, high skill, high talent. And I'm reminded of my mentor. My mentor has a quote that he asked the question, he asked the question, does the generator generate energy or does it put out energy? And I said it put out energy. He said, no, the generator generates energy. So in essence, what we keep seeing every time we come down here is the energy that is put out from the panel is a negative energy toward 568. Resolution number 568 is so self-understanding. And it is so plain to see, but the energy that we keep projecting is a smirk when it's mentioned on who should hold on to the responsibilities. The negative aspect of, hey, you know what, I don't want to do this. The other context of, hey, you know what, who has the opportunity, who's the person responsible for putting together commissions? All this negative energy toward something that the world knows needs to happen. Tampa, you all have an opportunity today to change history. You can change history by being the city on the map that brings forth resolution number 568 for people to whom you know deserve it. So come on, let's do the right thing here. Let's utilize your generated energy to make this come to pass.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. All right. Yes, ma'am, please state your name.
Good morning. Angela Birdsong, representing the Democratic Black Caucus, and I'm the president. And we have 100,000 Black registered voters as Democrats in Hillsborough County, which includes the city of Tampa. and I'm here to talk about 568. Now, nothing is not an option here. Your voters want to see that you do something. They tell me we voted in all Democrats and we can't get anywhere. That's unacceptable. Even if you do something small, like say, you know what, all of you people who have companies in the city of Tampa, why don't you take 2 or 3 disadvantaged youths and give them an internship? Pay them $300 a week, give them an Uber card, and let them come out of poverty. You could steer them towards union jobs. The unions are begging for people. They get a 4-year apprenticeship, they get a job for life, they get a pension. Why don't we do a little union drive? Tell them, hey, you know, all of the unions are looking to hire right now. They're looking to hire you. So if you do something, even if it's small, it certainly is better than nothing. We have citizens in the city of Tampa who would gladly be on a commission, on a council, and give of their time. You can put aside a little money for them if they need if they need to spend any money to make this happen, but we need them to come up with a solution, put it forward to to your council, but we need something. Anything at this point is better than nothing. So I'm asking you to try to come up with a little something so the voters can say, you know what, I voted Democrat and this is what I got. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Please state your name.
First, my name is Patrick Williams, located 1112 East Scott Street. You know, y'all have a position where y'all could do something for us, just like the young lady just a while ago said. But I'm grateful because I got a great mail there. If y'all want to look at it, you can look at it, but make sure it get back to me. Y'all want to look at it? I'll hold it up so you can see it. It's a cross with Jesus Christ. The man that gave it to me, I want him to stand up and identify himself. He's been so grateful, and I want all of y'all to know that my love goes out to all of y'all. I'm not a selfish person. I love everybody. And I thank God for putting that spirit in me. Because I can't get down here like I want to every week, but I get down here when I can. You know what? The lady brought a violation to my daddy's property, and she gave me a few days to get it cleaned up. Well, I was cleaning it up, but people bring their garbage from the other places and put it right there on my daddy's property. But she, thank God, she got it, but this is all of them, okay. And I want her to look into it, Miss, what's your name, Mrs.? Okay, Miss Johnson. Thank God for you. I pray to God to bless you in a mighty way and everybody else. You know, y'all don't give me enough time to stay up here, so I got to cut it short. You know, that Jackson House been vacant and been up there for 20 years, and y'all never did nothing about it. Now they give me a limitation where I have to get my daddy's property cleaned up. And if I don't get it cleaned up, they're going to give me another violation. Well, I want Ms. Johnson to look into it for me. And I know you all can do something about it because I'm an honest person. I try to do what's respectable. I don't try to hurt nobody's feelings. I just try to tell it like it is. And I thank God for this brother getting me up here and letting me get up here and pray because they was rejecting me for many years. They wouldn't let me talk to God, but God has been good to me, extremely good. I wish that thing didn't rain. He's been good to me, and he not only been good to me, but he given me power to do what I can do. I got a handicap to stand back there. I can't walk around like y'all can. I can't run and jump around. I wish I could. I would be doing that. God has been extremely good to all of us, whether you like it or not. He's been extremely good to me, and I just give him all the praise and all the glory. I wish I had more time to talk to y'all because I ain't got near about what I have to say. So y'all give me a day where I can come up here and speak like I need to speak.
Thank
And
you
don't
very
get
much,
upset
sir.
about me because I'm handicapped. Give me a little more time. I'll be glad to speak where I need to speak. But, it's a lot got to be done here in city of Tampa for
Thank you
people
very
of
much,
color.
sir.
And we need that.
Thank you.
Jesus,
Yes,
for
sir.
all
Yeah.
of you.
Yes, ma'am, please state your name. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Keela McCaskill, and I came by this morning to say to the city council, I want you, first of all, not to be distracted by some of the noise and the nonsense that we've seen recently. And also that when people come before you, pay attention to where they reside. Don't let a few disrupt what we have going here in this city. What happened recently doesn't concern the majority of the people that can vote for you. They're not here. They didn't have an outcry. They didn't come before you. So, sir, you've been doing a mighty fine job. We don't always see eye to eye, continuing the good work. What I am down here to say is that what would concern us is if we ignored Resolution 568. What would concern us is biking, walking, living while black penalties. That would concern us. Here in Tampa, we have a great opportunity to do something great. Forbes has already said that one of the greatest cities to live in is Tampa. We want to continue in that. What we need to pay attention to is the power in unity and the outcry that we have as it relates to housing. Next week, we have another workshop. I want to make sure that you all pay attention to what's happening and what could happen as it relates to the need. We need over 26,000 units for housing. How are we going to get there? What's going to be the strategy? We know we're going to hear numbers next week, but you keep at the top of mind, how are we going to get to 26,000 units? What will be the strategy? Who will participate? What is my constituent saying? That is what I would like to direct your attention to. That is the outcry. The need is the call, and all of you have been voted in to help this community. These people trust you. They believe in you. We want to make sure that you're putting every single ounce of effort you have into the need, which is housing. That is our priority. And as it relates to Resolution 568, I just believe that if you do the right thing as it relates to out-of-the-box approaches to housing, utilizing some of the existing landowners' property and their interest in contributing to this great need, out-of-the-box approaches, speaking to the nonprofits that already exist. You're not reinventing the wheel. These people are already working in this space. There can be opportunities for the individuals that has been affected by the systemic racism as it relates to land use and zoning, et cetera. You can do something special as it relates to housing and check the box over in regarding this Resolution 568. I do believe that committee is important. I do believe we need to do something about it, but we need to quantify and actually identify how we'll make that approach. I do think you have some programs in place, but just find a way to appropriate it so that we can see that you care about this resolution, you care about these people that are waiting on you to do the right thing. Recently, I sent you all an email saying there was a synergy here. You guys were working collectively. We don't want to stop that. The administration has slowed down their attacks. You guys are working well together. I don't want to see a distraction from a non-Tampa resident affect us. We can still
Thank you
be
very
great
much.
in Tampa.
Yes,
Thank you.
ma'am. Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am, please state your name. Good morning.
Good morning, Connie Burton. I was here to speak about item number 4, but I would just say nationally, it is being revealed of the gap between homeownership as it relates to the African-American community throughout the nation. And in a recent report, it showed the median income of Black folks, African-Americans in this city, was almost 2 to 1 to that of white folks. Even when there's significant down payment assistance, working class poor people have still not been able to purchase those homes. So a real deep dive discussion and creative thinking has to occur in order to get us to that place. That's why I'm truly in favor of having people that can speak clearly to the issues. The fact that we have in this city a mayor advisory council that has been in place since 1981, that has failed to even come back and give a report to its council or either to the community. The fact that the body appoints, you don't appoint, but the mayor appoint the Tampa Housing Authority Board with your approval, And those people never come here to say or give an accounting as to why we have well over 20,000 people waiting for housing. The Housing Authority never addressed the fact that over 25 years, they cannot give an accounting of how many people have gone into home ownership. And so, yes, we do need a commission of people that is unafraid to speak to the real issues in our community. In Resolution 568, you said that you understood long-term systemic racism. It's not going to disappear until we meet with real legitimate concerns, issues, and willing to move forward. 568 is real. 568 ain't going nowhere. The community is ignited with knowing that this council 4 years ago wrote the resolution, committed themselves to it, but has not put feet to fire. What I was impressed with last week when I heard the budget director, when you asked the question, could the city budget sustain if each and every one of you all received $75,000 pay increase? And the answer was yes. And Councilman Miranda said, well, could it handle $100,000? And he said yes. And so therefore, the community is looking at ways in which you and the mayor's administration can put such a commission together that don't sit stalled, but has the necessary resources so we can deal with the legitimate concerns of that resolution and start moving our community forward.
Thank you very much. All right, is there anyone else? If not, I'll ask, is there anybody registered for general public comment? Thank you very much. That concludes public comment. At this time, we'll start off with item number 1 on our workshop. I believe Mr. O'Connor is here, as well as others, to present on that. And there is a PowerPoint presentation as well. Yes, ma'am. Ms. Feely.
Good morning, Council. Abby Feely, Deputy Administrator, Development and Growth Management for the city. We actually have a PowerPoint presentation on 1, 2, and 3, as they're all related to illegal construction, construction process, over-enforcement, under-enforcement, and then also on educating the real estate community on the permit capabilities and unpermitted work.
So let me ask you a question. Are you going to go and do each PowerPoint presentation back to back to back? Or are you going to pause and allow for public comment and then go? And any suggestion from council members?
I only have one presentation.
It's all together. The PowerPoint is.
Oh, okay, covering 1, 2, and 3. Okay, very good.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, then go ahead.
Okay, thank you very much, Council. Abby Feely again, and with me this morning is Keith O'Connor, Director of Code Enforcement, J.C. Hutchinson, our building official, and then from our legal team, Susan Johnson-Velez and Kamaria Pettis-Malcolm. We've been working on these 3 motions together, and we have a comprehensive presentation for you this morning. Here are the 3 motions that were presented by various council members in relation to this topic. The first was to bring forth a plan for the illegal residential units to come into compliance. The second was to discuss how the city can fairly and systematically go through neighborhoods to identify what structures are illegal, and then also to work with the realtor and real estate community to adequately inform buyers. And then the last one was to explain the current or new policies to evaluate whether we are enforcing too little or too much. So today's presentation is organized in the following way. We are going to have, Susan's going to come up and share with you some of the real estate industry professionals, what our responsibility is in relation to doing outreach, and what those industry professionals' responsibility is in order to be providing their services. And then we're going to go through the objective of neighborhood enhancement and construction activity. The current enforcement process, it has 2 different arms to it. One is the neighborhood enhancement side, or what we refer to as the code enforcement side, and the other one is the construction activity compliance team, which we started about 2 years ago under JC's direction, that really deals with active construction. And what was happening was when code enforcement would handle a stop work order or work without permit, it would take almost 21 days for that to become an actual violation. And for people who were doing illegal work, they'd come in and go out, and that 21 days was critical to actually getting that property cited. So that was taken in-house to the Construction Services Division, and we're going to talk about that today too. So we'll take you through what the current enforcement process is. We'll also give you some numbers on how many enforcement cases we've had, who's gone to magistrate, how many of those cases has complied before they went to the magistrate, what's going on there. And then we actually brought to you today some pictures of what's going on when we go out, how when somebody's pulling a permit for X, we go out and we see work's being done on Y, and that we have a responsibility to ensure that our buildings are safe for our residents and visitors, and that they're being maintained that way. And I think that's the other critical in this discussion, is that JC's team really handles when something is under construction. Keith's team really handles the maintenance of properties and the ongoing maintenance. Once they've received a certificate of occupancy or a certificate of completion for the work, their team really deals with accumulations, inoperable vehicles. So we're going to go through all of that for you this morning. So I'm going to turn it over to Susan to talk to you a little bit about the real estate industry and professionals.
Good morning, Council. Susan Johnson, Velez Legal Department. So as Abby mentioned, one of the components of one of the motions was how to work with industry professionals. But those regulations and required disclosures for things like latent defects are really controlled by state law. You can see the brief quote here from the case Johnson v. Davis, a 1985 Florida Supreme Court case that obligates or requires a seller of a home to disclose facts that might affect the value of a property that wouldn't be readily available or observable by a buyer. It requires that seller to notify the buyer. And so that, again, is controlled by state law. That's still good law today, and sellers are required to make that disclosure, and real estate professionals are well aware of those requirements for sellers to make disclosure. So things like unpermitted work will be required to be disclosed if it's not something that's readily observable by a buyer. And this applies to whether it's new construction, it applies to a house that will be 100 years old, it applies to commercial real estate, it applies to residential real estate. And I just put the FAR-BAR contract. If you've bought or sold real estate in the state of Florida, you might be familiar with the FAR-BAR contract. It is a contract that was created through a collaboration of Florida Association of Realtors and the Florida Bar to make sure that all the required elements for a purchase and sale are included in a document, and also includes all those required disclosures, the standard disclosures. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them, but.
Yes, so in regarding this under Florida law, where a seller of a home knows, so for example, if they know of a seller or property owner knows of issues and does not disclose them, and like lies on a form and says, no, everything is fine, and then an inspector doesn't catch them because they didn't do their due diligence.
Then there would be remedies under state law as well that are available to a buyer of that property against the seller.
In what case? It would have to be, you would sue for breach of contract
or right,
there's
there
a
would
variety
be,
of things.
correct, exactly.
Okay.
Whatever the appropriate, but there are remedies available under state law to a seller against to a buyer against a seller for failure to make those disclosures. And there may be also cause of action against a real estate professional who fails to disclose.
Very interesting. Is it even worth it if it's $1,000 repair, but it's thousands in litigation? That's the question.
That's the balancing test, correct.
Okay, Councilmember Carlson, I saw your hand, and Councilmember Miranda.
Two questions. One, do they simply have to state the facts? Like if a house is 1,000 square feet and there's an adjacent ADU or whatever that's 500 square feet, I'm making this up, but if they simply state the house is 1,000 square feet, is that sufficient because they're excluding the square footage of the adjacent structure, or do they specifically have to disclose that there's an illegal structure on the?
Well, it would be anything that's not readily observable. So a permit or construction that took place without a permit might be something that's not readily observable, or it might be, there's a situation on the land where, it floods in a certain area, and those are the types of things that would be required to be disclosed.
So they would have to, if there's an ADU that's illegal, they would have to not just exclude the square footage, but they would have to say this structure is not permitted.
That would be a fact that might not be readily available, but somebody might be able to, all these things are on a case-by-case basis, but obviously if somebody does their due diligence, and to a certain extent, the obligation is on the buyer as well to do their due diligence and check all the available public records, to see whether there are permits for certain structures on the property.
It seems like we should maybe do some outreach to the Realtors Association to see if there's more education and information we should put out there. The other thing is the property appraiser's website has a site plan for every property. Can someone assume that that site plan is correct and that it would not include illegal structures, or would it sometimes include illegal structures?
I can't speak to that. I don't know.
Abby Feely, the property appraiser is a taxing entity. They're not a construction entity. So sometimes there are structures that are shown on there that they have gone out and seen that those structures now exist, but they never had permits on them. We're going to talk about that as one of our tools, because in Leon County, under their property appraiser, you can click on and it actually has a connection to the permit. So all of the permit records. So that's one of the conversations we have initiated and are starting to have with Mr. Henriquez at the property appraiser's office to see if there is a way for us to, I don't want to speak ahead of that action being taken and knowing, but so if you go on, if you're purchasing a property in Leon County and you go on and the property is listed as a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and you go on to the property appraiser and it's only appraised as a 2-bedroom, 1-bath, you could link in to the permits and then see, did they pull a permit for the addition? Or if somebody says brand new roof, brand new AC, you can link right from theirs to see the entire permit history. So they're using that not to make the property appraiser accountable for the addition, but to show the buyer or the seller what is the permit record that is associated with that property.
It seems like most people who buy, and especially because we have a huge influx of new people moving in, that they wouldn't know. And I think most people tend to believe what they see, and they wouldn't know all the resource to look at. So the more we can link it, the better. Ms. Johnson-Velez, does it say anywhere in the FAR bar rules that that if there are any attachments that they must be approved site plans? It seems to me, the documents I've seen before, that sometimes they'll print out like the property appraiser's plan and not an Acela plan.
Well, I couldn't speak to the requirements of any attachments to the FAR contract. I don't have a copy of it with me, but I'm happy to get you that information if you'd like.
Yeah, I guess you guys are going to talk about it later, but it seems like we need to have a robust conversation with the realtors just to make sure that everybody's protected, because if we go in and start identifying lots of illegal structures, it sounds like there could be lots of lawsuits or lots of arguments out there. So it'd be better to proactively help make sure the realtors are partnering with us to educate the public. Thank you.
Councilmember Miranda.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank all of you for doing what you've done in the past and continue to work towards making this item here reality, which is very hard work, very difficult, because it's been going on for many, many years, 10, 20 years, 30 years. But I've heard the word structures. Sometimes a structure does not change. The internal part of the structure changes, which you cannot see. I don't care what kind of radar or what kind of screaming you have from any elected official's office. So what is entangled here, it's really about, and I understand, or I believe I understand, regarding the position that we're in, not only in this city, but throughout America, about finding affordable housing and people moving in where they can afford a place to live. And what happens between these structures is that the interior of the building has changed. And when you had a 3-bedroom, now you got a 6-bedroom apartment or house or whatever you want to call it, without any changes on the outside. Now, I'm sure that if there's a company that owns them, they're paying a much higher rate because it's a rental. It's not a personal property, belongs to a corporation or a company or whatever. And in these cases, just an example, and I may be a couple of dollars off, and I'm just gonna throw it out as an example. If you're paying $1,000 a year on your ad valorem taxes, if this was a rental property, you'd be paying $3,000 a year because it's rental. The problem with that is, what is the school system getting? What is the city of Tampa getting? What is the county getting? Very little to none from the changes of the ad valorem taxes since it was built as a structure for a family. But the family is not there no more. They have sold out, and some company has bought it or some individuals bought it and changed the inside. Those that have a legitimate business, those individuals, I'm not concerned about them because I'm sure that they're listed under the company which they own or whatever. So it comes to my attention by many individuals, not only, you got south of Kennedy and north of Kennedy. I don't believe south of Kennedy you might have some, but you don't have the greatest preponderance of them anywhere near what you have north of Kennedy. Why is that? I guess is the income of the person who's buying the houses can't afford to buy a house south of Kennedy. And this goes back to years. Now it's getting pretty equitable. You can't afford a house anywhere you go. So what is happening is they turn these houses into motels, motel might be not the right word, but a house where you can have 3 times the amount of people living in it. And you're not paying your taxes properly because you're a corporation without a name. You own it, and I might use my name, and then somebody else says, no, my name is Charles A. Miranda, and somebody buys it as Charles Miranda. Well, the A's not there. It's a different person. It's not in most instances. So those are the people that are not contributing to the coffers of any government, but we, the taxpayers, enhancement, are paying for their taxes because if they were paying higher, maybe we'd be a little lower, possibly. So all these things are there. The illegal construction is one thing, but the preponderance of the people that do this is because of the money. Most of it is in cash. I can verify. I've had a couple of people call me and they say, I can't write a check. I got to give them cash. So there's evidence of that somewhere. And that's called, in my mind, just not the right thing to do. We all live in the same city. We all have the same responsibility. They get the same benefits we all get. But it's got to change somehow. And I'm not saying that this is possible, but you can have 4 names, and then you buy another house under 2 names without the other last 2 names. All that is possible. You have to think, if they've done this, what are they going to do next? So I'm just trying to clarify, and I'm not one that's saying no to any houses built behind your property. There's enough setback for you to have something affordable, 800 square foot, I think it's a law. And you can do that as long as that property is, if you're going to rent it out, and I want to hear about, oh, they're all related. Sometimes they're not all related. Sometimes the property that you see there is rented to individuals that really need housing. And these are the things that I've been told, and these are the things that I've witnessed. And there's some houses where, north of Kennedy, that are so vagrant, they got apartment A, B, C, and D. You can see it on the door. So these are the things that are there. Whether they're qualified as a landlord and those properties are taxed at a higher rate, I don't know. But there was 120 some in some section of the city that was given, and I'm sure that more than likely that's what you're going to address today because that's a start. But within that start, there's a lot of other things you have to look at. Not only the change of the structure, but the occupancy rate, who's in that structure. And and I'm not trying to come out of that. What we're doing in affordable housing is great. However, I think we can change it by making different changes between us and the administration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. All right, yes, ma'am.
So what is the objective, Abby Feely, what is the objective of neighborhood enhancement and the construction activity compliance team? And really, it's property and building safety and code compliance. when you have people doing work without permits, you can't ensure the safety of that structure. Either that they've moved a load-bearing wall without a permit, and now you don't know if the roof is gonna collapse, they've done electrical work or plumbing work, things that could be hazardous to the inhabitants of the property. So the citation process, we're gonna talk a little bit about that next, really is geared toward accomplishing compliance. You don't want to take that person to the magistrate or the board. You want the structure to come into compliance with the code so that it's meeting code and it's safe. Who makes up these teams? And the city is comprised of 136,000 parcels. Close to 137,000 pieces of property that we have 33 inspectors on Keith's team and we have 4 inspectors on JT's team. So that's 37 team members to 137,000 parcels. So that's clearly, we're not touching every parcel once a year. We're probably not touching every parcel twice, in 2 years, but I just wanted to make it clear to you what we have and who's out there. I am going to turn it over to Kamaria to talk to you about how an investigation starts, what's that process, and then we'll go turn it over to JC, and then we'll come back.
Good morning, Kamaria Pettis-Naco from the legal department. So let's talk about how an investigation starts. The public can the public can provide a complaint to the city of Tampa on numerous ways, and this slide provides ways in which the public can provide complaints to the city of Tampa. But also an investigation can begin by the inspectors doing proactive work within the city of Tampa. As you can see on the slide below, we have data from 2022 and 2023 on the number of public complaints that were received to the city of Tampa and the number of proactive complaints from the city inspectors. As you can see with neighborhood enhancement, and I'll explain on the next slide, what each department, what code sections each department focuses on. But as you can see, neighborhood enhancement, the majority of neighborhood enhancement is proactive investigation. As opposed to construction without a permit, they are responding to public complaints. On the next slide, it explains the code sections that each department is responsible for. Construction services stays in Chapter 5, which is work without permits. As opposed to neighborhood enhancement, those code inspectors focus on property maintenance, which was Chapter 19, stormwater, streets and sidewalks, transportation, etc. I'd encourage members of City Council and along with the public to refer to Code Section 19-5 to get the specific code sections and chapters that neighborhood enhancement focuses on, but this just gives a general idea of what those departments focus on. So if those departments, when they do an inspection of when they complete their investigation, if they determine that there is a violation of the City of Tampa Code of Ordinances, a notice of violation is issued. The goal, as Abby Feely stated earlier, is compliance with the code. So there are the majority of the instances where people receive a notice of violation, they're alerted that they're in violation of the City of Tampa Code, they come into compliance. If they don't come into compliance, then our process is your case is being presented to a code enforcement special magistrate for hearing to determine whether or not you are in fact in violation of the City of Tampa Code. So this next slide provides some data on the numbers of cases in which neighborhood enhancement and construction services have done throughout the year, 2 years, for cases that are complied, cases that went to the special magistrate, and again, the total number of complied. This slide, I'd encourage City Council and the public to view the columns only as individual columns and not as a whole. So if you could see the total complied for Chapter 5, Chapter 19, and Chapter 27, in 2022, there's a high percentage of cases that come into compliance with the City of Tampa Code. excuse my voice, I'm sorry. And that same data supports the 2023, the number of cases that come into compliance with the City of Tampa Code. Again, the goal of neighborhood enhancement and the goal of construction services is compliance with the code. I know this, I don't want this slide, again, it's hard to, and I apologize that it may be hard to digest, and when we were brainstorming, I had difficulties with it also. But if you look at it just as an individual column, the data just shows the cases that were complied before it went to, before the special magistrate had to even get involved. Then the cases that were presented to a special magistrate, and then at the end, it's showing the number of total cases that complied after a code enforcement hearing.
Councilmember Hurtak.
I just have a question because the slide before shows, yeah, we don't have it on our screens. And actually, the slide before that, yeah, I can't see it because of the words. If you could pop it on our screens, that would be great.
There we go.
Great. Yeah, so here it shows that total cases in 2022 were 12,000. But then if you go forward 2 slides, 900 were in compliance. What happened to the?
So these are, they could have come into compliance, but this is slide that is on your screen now. Is just showing the initial, how an investigation starts, the phase. You can come into compliance. I understand Councilwoman Hurtak, you're connecting the slides and the data. This is not connecting the slides and the data. This is just a slide. Just imagine capturing the data in this slide for what this slide is about. So this is about the initiation of a case. So from public complaints or proactive investigations. Again, so many cases come into compliance after that first notice of violation, alerting the public that you're in violation of the City of Tampa Code. A lot of cases come into compliance with the code.
Okay, so what you're saying is that the ones that come into compliance on the other slide are after?
Yes.
Okay, that makes sense.
These are complaints.
Okay.
These are complaints, this is the beginning.
These may not become code cases.
Okay,
So we
okay.
have CMPs, which are complaints, and CODs, which are the actual cases. So
Okay.
these are complaints where somebody said, I think there's a violation, we go check it out. It may or may not become a COD. If it
Yeah.
becomes a COD, that's the next slide where it either comes into compliance or it goes to the magistrate. So while we have more complaints than our actual cases.
So proactive investigation, would be a investigator saying, oh, this looks like something might be, but it might not be. Okay, I see what
Right.
you're saying. But this, you're telling me this captures people who just get that first notice and go, okay, just gonna handle it, be
Yes.
done with it.
I'm gonna mow
it's
my
over."
lawn, I'm
Yeah.
done. So I
Okay.
never
Okay.
become a COD because by
Great.
the time they go out
Okay.
there, the lawn is mowed. So
Wonderful,
that number
wonderful.
falls off.
Yes, and
Okay.
so, it would be interesting to see that percentage, because I think it's the majority, obviously, the majority of cases, and I think that the public, it would be interesting to know how many of those folks like just immediately come into compliance, which obviously is the large majority, but thank you, that clarifies my question.
Councilmember Clendenin and Councilmember Carlson.
On the other screen, the last screen you presented with the, next one, yeah, that. So on the Chapter 5 Building Code, percentage complied, what happened to the other 60%?
Again, as I stated initially, please don't, you're trying to, and I understand I understand it's easy to say, I'm going to use the numbers on the 2 slides before.
Well, no, just on this one.
So on
And
this
they're
one,
individual columns.
Yeah,
They're
so-
not together.
so there were 583 Chapter 5, right? That became code cases.
Yes.
283 of those 583 complied.
Okay.
300 are still went to the magistrate, some of them could have complied,
so-
but there are
the-
some still
okay.
that are open.
Okay, that was my question.
That 60% that
Okay.
you're looking for, they're either in the permitting process, they
Or they're not
needed
in
a
compliance.
rezoning to come in, they built something that didn't meet setbacks, so now they needed a variance plus, so their case is
What are the
still
odds that
out
somebody
there.
would build something that doesn't meet setbacks?
It happens all the time. All the time. So those are still out there. So that is just showing you of the total chapter 5, which
Yeah,
was
okay,
583,
that answered my question.
48%
Yep.
complied.
Okay, very good,
Yes.
thank you.
Councilman Charles.
Thank you all for doing this. On this slide, and then can you go back to the other one, please?
Which one?
One more.
One more.
Yeah, on these, it would be very helpful if we had some kind of breakdown of them so we could understand. On the previous slide, the chapter 5, it would be interesting to figure out on building cases, are there certain categories of things, like if somebody's built a house illegally, it's harder for them to comply. I wonder if there's certain kinds of cases that we could learn about from the data that shows propensity to comply. Like you said, if somebody hasn't mowed their lawn, that's easy to fix. If they built a house in the wrong way and the whole thing is illegal, then it's harder to fix. I don't know if you all capture subcategories or data, but that to me would be really interesting. And then the same thing here, it would be interesting to find out why these all drop off. Did the majority of them come into compliance? Did you find out they were frivolous complaints? Did they not rise to the level of being actual complaints? Was it just an angry neighbor or something? All that kind of data would be very helpful. The other thing, and I don't know if this is the right place or not, but I'll throw this out. We've gotten feedback from several folks in the community. One of them is in the room, and I probably will ask these questions, but I'll just go ahead and throw them out there. This is, we get questions all the time from the community. And, one of the things that we get, as you said at the beginning, on one hand, we get complaints that that code enforcement is not enforcing enough. On the other hand, we get complaints that they're enforcing too much. And so I have three things related to that. One is when people feel like they've been unfairly tagged, one of the things they say that the investigators are arbitrary and there's a lack of consistency. Can you just talk to us for a minute about how you make sure that there's consistency within the department investigating these?
Well, Kamaria Pettis-Malcolm from the legal department. Consistency is you're either in violation of the code or you're not. Consistency is when you see a violation, you conduct an investigation, you cite that person for a violation of the code, and you encourage them to be in compliance with the code. That's consistency. So arbitrary, I don't understand how that relates to.
Like I think it comes up sometimes when we've seen cases where one neighbor is tagged for something and the neighbor next door is not tagged for something, and so people feel like and that's just one example. And anyway, just anything that we can learn about how you all are keeping it consistent would help in explaining to constituents. The other thing is the question about Zillow. Is it legal by state law to look at Zillow or Realtor.com listings for the code enforcement people to look inside buildings and backyards to see if they're compliant or not?
We have a slide to address that.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't do that, but we'll talk about what we use as our investigative tools. I mean, typically, even when we bring you rezonings, we do look at the historical street view on things to see what was there, what was a use that was there. That is not our primary source.
But is Zillow legal or not legal? I don't know the answer.
It's an investigative tool. I believe it is legal.
It is legal?
Yes.
And then what about drones? Is code
We don't
enforcement-
have drones.
Are you allowed to use drones or not? Are they legal or not legal?
Well, that's not a tool that we have, and so we don't even, that's none of
And
the.
I'm just
I
asking
mean,
for-
if you go on an aerial today and you see that the house has an addition, it goes all the way back to the property line, and you go on Google Earth and you go back to 2019 and it didn't, clearly there was a change. We don't go in backyards, but let me let Keith and JC finish, because they actually do that, and we brought you some pictures today to show you what we do.
But from a
with
legal
that.
perspective, you're not allowed to just walk in somebody's backyard, is that correct?
Without permission, no.
And then what about look over somebody's fence?
Without permission, no, you do not.
but you can look at Google Earth, and you can look at Zillow, you can look at Realtor.com.
You can look at whatever public platform is available, yes.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, it's just we get asked that all the time, so we need to know the answer to it. And then the other thing is, and maybe y'all are going to bring this up later, there's at least, one allegation that there are like 80 or 90 code enforcement complaints made with somebody's name. He was very upset that his name was illegally used. And how do we, I know that state law now requires people to put names. How do we make sure that somebody's name is not illegally used to file complaints?
Councilman Carlson, Mr. Hutchinson addressed that issue several months ago, but as it's on this slide, the legislature requires a name and an address. There's no provision in the Florida statute or in our code for staff to investigate the investigator. So if someone says, I didn't file that complaint, well, it's the duty on the department and our staff to investigate the complaint to determine whether or not there is in fact a violation of our code. If there's a violation of our code, it's the duty and it's their obligation to enforce our code to encourage the public to come into compliance. But there's no obligation from the Florida statute or our code for our staff to investigate the investigator.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Ray.
It's funny
If I look at
because
these
JC's
numbers, the
even
same
had,
slide that Councilman Carlson is talking about, under the public complaints in 2022 was 4,690, and under the progressive investigation, it was 12,034. But when you compare to 23, it tells a story that's really eye-popping. The public complaints went up by roughly 100 something, but the progressive investigation went up by 4,117. So that's a plus that you're saying that you're really doing something to make it, because you went up 1/3 of it. And on construction activities, in the bottom you have 877 versus 665, or I don't know, 212 or so decrease. So that means that you've done better in the decreasing of finding the facts and resolving the facts of that, whatever investigation was between 22 and 2023. So you've done your due diligence as far as progressively getting more and solving more at the same time. So I can understand that. But, I mean, that's a lot of work for a lot of people, because not only is it the court enforcement, it's the legal department, other departments that are involved in these things. And I understand they take time. But I also understand that the city is just moving so rapidly, and you said you had 100, how much, thousands, 137,000?
there's 137,000 parcels.
Parcels.
And the other
So-
thing you may remember is we run about 23,000 permits a year in the Construction Services Center. 23,000 total permits we average over the past 5 years each year. So you combine that with the complaints and the other activity to see that out of 23,000 permits, we're only at this percentage of the
Just a
complaint
thought, when you
section.
said you run 23,000 permits on the beginning, and I don't know this, maybe other council members do, when you get a permit applicant come in, do you verify that the property owner is the property owner that's before you, or the construction worker, whoever's getting the permit, to make sure it's not a rental house? How can you do
The
that?
permit wouldn't, yeah, there are two different types of permits you can pull. An owner-builder permit, and if you are not the owner and you are not occupying, you may not pull an owner-builder permit. And if the property is not homesteaded, you may not pull an owner-builder permit. If you're doing other work and you're not, then it is pulled by a GC.
And you- Well, it gets deeper and deeper, but I understand.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to JC and Keith to walk you through how their teams, what their teams use as their investigative processes and their standard operating procedures.
Thank you, Abby. Good morning, council. Keith O'Connor, Director of Neighborhood Enhancement. Just to touch on a couple of things that I can see you guys have questions on, before I just go into our investigative techniques. It's just three things up here. But just so you're aware, we've talked about this before. The code enforcement is divided into 6 districts throughout the city. So each district has a district supervisor and code inspectors assigned to that district. So, Councilman Carlson, you asked about how do we ensure that we're spreading the wealth equally? Well, that's how we do it per district. And then each code inspector assigned to that district, they have an obligation to patrol and look for violations in that district. So direct observation is what we call proactive. And evidence obtained from the public, those are the complaints. So they attack the complaints first. You get, if you're a code inspector, you have a queue, and each day it'll get loaded with additional complaints. They have 7 days to touch that complaint. While they're doing that, obviously, if you go down a street and you're going to look at a particular location, if you see other violations, you can make a proactive complaint. Because of the new law, there are certain code violations that you would need a complainant on. So if you don't have a complainant, if you're at one house and the code inspector is telling you you have a violation and you're wondering, what about my neighbor down the block? Well, that might be a situation where we didn't get a complaint on that, and we can't go to that one without the complainant. So I just wanted to clear that up. So those are the different types of investigative tools that we use. Everything that's on public record is available to our inspectors, and not only should, you should use everything available to you to make your case. So that part is legal. So, and the other thing that Abby already touched on, which is very important because I know it gets confusing, my team handles after the permitting process is over. Once your construction is done, if you built a new house and you get a CO, now the code says you need to maintain it, and my team will come in if it does fall into disrepair or anything like that. The majority of the houses and parcels in the city of Tampa, they are code compliant on their own. So one of the best takeaways from these numbers, if you look at it that way, is the citizens are maintaining their property. And then if it does fall in violation, and we alert them to that, 63% of them get into compliance on their own. They do that on their own because we don't have enough city staff to police every violation in the whole city.
Councilmember Carlson, you have a
Okay.
question, sir?
Yeah, you said that there were some sorry, I won't get the words exactly right, but there were some violations that can only be initiated by a complaint, right, not by the inspector. Did I hear that right? So if your inspector is driving around, there are certain kinds of things that they cannot initiate on their own, that it has to be from a complaint.
So the way the law reads, if I'm an inspector and I'm driving around and I can look from the road, from where I'm legally allowed to be, and see that I know that that's a violation, I can open that case.
Okay.
But if I'm not sure, if I don't know if he's, zoned for that or permitted for that, if I have to go somewhere else to get that answer, I need a complainant. And then the other exception is life safety. If it's something that's hazardous, they can do it.
If you have any information on that, that would be helpful when we're speaking to neighborhood groups to be able to explain the difference of that. I don't know if you have any tools that we can help explain that. And I should also say,
you can't be anonymous to make a complaint. So if they give the complaint.
What I mean is the type of complaints, though. If they're people say.
Well, they can make the complaint, and if we can deal with it, we'll.
What
deal
I mean
with
is that if somebody says, why has no inspector already tagged this house? It could be because of what you just said, that the inspector didn't see it, a neighbor has to complain. And so if the neighbors know that there are certain types of things that inspectors can't flag on their own, that would be helpful for the neighborhood associations to know.
Yeah, we go over that every time we go out to one. We explain, explain. It is confusing, but we try to explain.
And I should also say, there, from constituents, I've had a lot of very complicated code enforcement issues, and every time I send you one, your team jumps on it and handles it very well, so thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Go ahead.
All right, I'll turn it over to JC.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
All right. Kind of going back to some of the data, the reason why we did it for the last 2 years, because that's when kind of those subcategories that Councilman Carlson, that's when we started to do that. Before that, Keith handled all of the complaints, whether it was violation of existing construction and everything. So when the construction compliance team was put together in February of '22, that's when we started to really look at those subcategories and separate those areas. So when, similar to Kamaria making the comments about, work without permit, that's how we cite it, to say work is done without permit. That is the section of the code that you're violating, and then there is some discretion as we go into figuring out how to make that into compliance. Here are our investigative techniques. As Keith mentioned, this is the things we take from the complainant. We go by, we have to get consent. We don't just, peek in windows and do things like that. We have to be given consent. Sometimes we have flippers that, we say, hey, can we come in? And they open the door and we walk right in. I have some photos to show here shortly of some projects that we've gone to and we were given consent to see things and be able to be on the property. Ideally, once we have a building permit, we're also allowed to be on the property because we have to investigate and make sure that things are being installed correctly to the code. Two comments on kind of going back to the Zillow issue as well. Once again, that's public information, but we do not, we've made that a policy to not initiate based off of just Zillow. Like, we can use it to make the case once we go to magistrate, but that's not what's initiating the violation. Our staff has to go out there and see the violation. So these are a few we just wanted to share with you all about some of the proactive stuff that we do see. As staff is, going to an inspection, riding by, we tried to make sure not to put any addresses or anything on here, but ideally, these are the type of projects that we see. As you can see, there's a whole second story that's being added to a single-story structure. These are the things that we're seeing. These are the things that we're going out and reacting to. So obviously, worried about roof load. You can kind of see those stairs to the side there aren't code compliant. So these are the things that we're seeing on a daily basis. This is another one. Typically, if we see a dumpster or we see something out in front of a property, we're going to stop. So ideally, we're saying, hey, do we see a placard? You're supposed to have a permit placard, regardless if it's a demolition, any construction, any alteration to a structure, you should have a permit associated with it. So once again, we ask, can we come in? Guy lets us right in. This is what we see. These are the things that we're seeing on sites. Once again, if I see a dumpster out in front, staff's going to ask a question. This one, we were on site for one type of permit, but it was beyond the scope. We came in and it was only for a plumbing permit, and then obviously you can see additional work that has been done. And then finally, this one, we have a whole building. A whole building was built, site cleared, everything knocked out. A whole building was built without a permit. So ideally, a lot of these we do deal with, and they are fairly nuanced, and we have to go to magistrate, but we see issues like this, and we see properties like this that are just being built, period. And that's kind of, when we look at going to magistrate and things like that, that's why those dates take a little longer, because we're trying to figure out how to, this person has built this, it's built incorrectly, the setbacks may not be right, all other type of building code, fire code things that we need to resolve. And, does it benefit us to rush it to magistrate? No. We understand that there's certain things that need to be resolved, meeting with the engineer, meeting with civil engineer, meeting with architects to try to get this into compliance. So these are the things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. Our next steps. So we would like to, me, good, okay. Just kind of keeping the process as is. But like I said, we wanted to present everything to you all comprehensively here. As is brought up a few times here, is to meeting with the Greater Tampa Realtors to conduct information sessions about the permitting process, where to find this information, where it is on a seller. People don't use a seller that often unless you're building. So ideally, providing that information to them and hopefully showing them what we see and what we're looking for. And then kind of, as Abby's mentioned about best practices, reaching out to other building departments, other cities to see what they're doing in dealing with illegal construction. And so that's kind of where the Leon County idea came from, because we talked to another jurisdiction and they say, hey, we have all of our information at the property appraiser site. So you're not having to go to a seller here. You're not having to go to this other site here. Everything's in one place. So if you're looking for a property, you want information on your property, you can find all of those things. So.
Is this just one of the PowerPoints, or is this everything?
This is it. This
For
is
1,
it.
2, and 3?
Yes, we combined everything together as an informational to provide you with that. One thing I did want to touch on, JC was just elected as president of the Suncoast chapter of the Building Officials of Florida. So that's very large and in charge for his role. And that is one thing, when he touched on the end, the best practices, when you all raise things to us and we know how we're doing them, and we look at and those processes, we're continually looking at those to make improvements. But we do reach out through BOAF and through other entities to see what other local governments are doing, how they run their code enforcement, how they run. And in relationship to reaching out to GTAR, we are in the process of that. We've been in contact with other building officials who do go out to the real estate community. They do tell them what are red flags, what need permits, what don't need permits. We have our website that tells you when I need a permit, when I don't need a permit, what I can do without a permit, when I need to come in and get a permit. So we have all that information we shared with you today, and that concludes our presentation.
So the bullet points that I saw was no recommendation or action for the inspection process or the complaint process. But then second, it said that you would then reach out to the Realtors Association to, I guess, brainstorm for different ideas. And then the third bullet point, I don't remember. What was the third?
That
one?
was just looking at best practices. That was us starting to work with Mr. Henriquez on looking at whether or not we could amend the Hillsborough County property appraisers to link into Acela for those building permit records. What would that interface be? We didn't want to, like I said at the beginning, I don't want to commit to you. We're just having that discussion. I don't know what that is cost-wise for us or for the county. I don't know some of those other variables, but we're committed to continuing to improve the tools that are available and to also communicate what those tools are that are available to homeowners, buyers, sellers. You can still go into Acela. I know we had some issues with the search bar before. The search bar is up and running. If you pop an address into the search bar today, just like going into Google, you can see all of the permit activity. You can see all of the code enforcement activity on that property. So you can pull up any property and see, did it have a CMP? Those are the complaints. It just came in. Did it have a COD? That is an actual code case. Is that COD open? Is it closed? Is it in process? What happened to it? You click on, it will tell you that was a code violation for work without permit, or that was a code violation for property accumulation. It was resolved. The property owner mowed the lawn. So all of that information is in that tool. We're not just sure that everybody knows that tool is out there, how to use that tool. So we're going to continue working on best practices to keep that information flowing.
Councilmember Carlson, Councilmember Miranda.
Thank you all for the presentation. There's a lot of different aspects of this, but folks want code enforcement to go in and clean up sites that are there. Some of them are really bad houses that are just abandoned. Some of them have illegal structures and others. And you all have gone through that. The other thing is that we've kind of hinted around is we've had cases come up, without mentioning any specific cases, we've had cases come up where people are suddenly tagged because they have an illegal ADU or whatever structure, and they say, well, it's not my fault, I bought it this way, and it's been there for 80 years, and it's not fair, I paid for it, why are you making me tear it down? And we're in a very difficult situation. I think my goal in that case would be to make sure that nobody's ever able to say that again. I don't know if when you're talking to the realtors, if it's possible to ask them to at least the buyer's agents to submit a piece of paper with information about how to access Acela and get that information. Here's how to do your due diligence from a City of Tampa point of view. But anything we can do to make sure that nobody says I bought it and had no idea. The second thing that we didn't talk about, and I don't know if this is still active, but there were issues years ago before I got on council and before this administration where, trying not to mention details, but there were cases where by executive order, a mayor waived code enforcement fines. And there was at least one case in South Tampa where folks were very, very upset about it. There was a case in East Tampa where somebody was upset that they didn't get waived. Is it still possible to waive fines by executive order? How often does that happen, and how could we provide some transparency into that? And the City Council, I presume, does not have that right.
No, Kamaria Pettis-Mackel from the legal department. The executive order that was signed by the mayor, I believe it was 2022. There's no provision in the executive order to waive fines.
So she closed that loophole. This mayor closed that loophole?
I don't know what loophole you're talking about previously. I'm just talking about what's currently in place.
Okay, so it doesn't
There is no
exist now.
provision to waive any code enforcement fines.
Okay, great.
Councilmember Miranda, Councilmember
Thank you.
Clement.
Mr. Carlton spoke exactly what I was going to talk about. Sometimes the party living in the dwelling that we find to be in compliance, that party didn't do it. It was a party that he bought the house from, or even go back 2 sales later, before that 15 years ago somebody did it. The guy bought the house 10 years ago. He didn't know he or she bought the house, and now the house is sold to a third party, and that's the one that we catch innocently that he said, I just bought this house in the way it is. And in my mind, I believe there has been some code violations. The whole thing about code enforcement is not about exorbitant fees being collected. It's about making the process of that building come in compliance. That's the number one goal. Money and so forth is secondary. But we want the buildings to come into compliance, and if it's a $10,000 penalty and you settle for $1,000, listen, I want the compliance, I want the people to be safe, and I want the people to live a happy life. But some 99%, I would say at least 50% of the ones that we're going after, they never knew what they had. So I'm glad you're talking to the Greater Realtors Association to make sure we can come into some agreement. So we want to help the realtor, we want to help the homeowners that are buying, and those that are selling also. So it just, but there's all kind of things going on. Thank you very much.
Councilman Carlson, I want to just provide another information about the executive order. Although the executive order does not waive fines, soft cost code enforcement fines are reduced. There is a settlement offer that is provided, and it's uniform throughout all cases based upon the timeline it takes to come into compliance with the code. There is a reduced settlement offer. Again, as Councilman Miranda said, the goal of code enforcement is compliance. And so once you're in compliance with the code, the executive order does offer, we provide a reduced cost in order to release the lien on the property. That's only for soft cost liens as a result of cases going to a code enforcement special magistrate.
Could you maybe send us information on what
Will
that
do.
schedule is? Like the one particular case, there was like 750,000 in fines, and allegedly it was reduced to zero. So is
Yeah,
that?
I don't know anything about that, so I can't speak to that, but the executive order in place does not allow staff or the department to waive fines. Again, they're reduced at a settlement offer because the goal of code enforcement is not to seek money, but to get compliance with the code.
Yeah, and if there are certain, if the rules have certain specific percentages in negotiation, then it takes out the allegation that it might be arbitrary. So
Correct.
if that all has been fixed,
Yes.
it would be good to know, because we can let the public know about it. Public it feels, because of some cases in the past, that some of it is arbitrary, so we can fix that.
I will send
Thank
that to you.
Question for you. How often, or how many times would you say in a given year that we actually order demolition of non-compliance construction?
I was just gonna address that, because I wanted to address the comment made by Councilman Carlson in relation to us having somebody tear down an ADU. As we've spoken to you today, the goal is compliance. We would never go right after somebody tearing something down. We would try to see, can they get a variance? Can they rezone it? Can we get the building permits done for it? I've been here, I don't want to admit, coming up on 24 years. I am not familiar with us going after anyone to tear something down. Our goal is compliance, and that's the route that we take. In relation to your question, we have one right now that JC is working on that's been like, I don't want to say 7 or 8 years, and we still haven't issued the order to have it torn down. We try as hard as we can, and in fact, this one went to the board. We have the right to go after it, to have it torn down. The property owner came to us again and said, I'd like to try to get the permit, and JC is working with them to try to, but at some point in time, it does become a nuisance, and it becomes unbearable to the neighbors, and we do have to work that way, but that is not the approach that we take.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hurtak?
Thank you. I don't know if it's this case or not, but on the variance review board, we had a case that came back to us twice that was for an addition, and both times the variance review board said, no, I'm sorry, we can't, we don't know what's behind your walls, and that's the concern. So what do you do in those types of cases? I mean, if that's the board, so.
Right, I mean, when a variance comes to you, right, work without permit, the only way to keep it is to get the variance because they're within the setback or whatever it is, and the variance review board denies them, they have an ability to appeal to city council, some of those you see, or they have the ability on their own to come into compliance, which might be removing part of the building. The thing is that if you didn't pull a permit to build the building, it's very difficult to pull a permit to demolish that portion of the building.
Yeah.
And those are some of the challenges that JC and his team face, because clearly we want what's left standing there to be in compliance and safe. You know, I always say, do you want to put your mom in this house and potentially the house could fall down? That's not, we want it to be safe. We want people to know when they go to bed at night, the home that they've purchased is safe to sleep in, it's safe to occupy, their kids are safe. I mean, that's where all of this comes from, and that's what our goal is.
Thank you.
Councilman Miranda.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those same lines, I remember one case, maybe it's the same case that Councilmember Hurtak's talking about. It's at least 10, 15 years ago, there was an individual south of the river, but close to the river, off of Nebraska or Florida Avenue, I forget which. And we went to see that. And that building hadn't been touched in years. It had no roof. It had, so what happened? They would come up and bring it up, and he would put 2 blocks and put a board like he's going to make a roof. Then another 2 years later, put another brick on, and that's how it was. So I forget, but I'm going to try to find that house, because now that you brought that up, my mind started to figure out where was it at. And I think it was 1 or 2 blocks away from the river on a corner next to 2 young ladies that were there about 70 years old.
Mr. Miranda, I believe I know what house you're talking about. Not a brick has changed.
Nothing changed?
Nothing changed.
I got to take a picture in front of that house because it's older than me.
Council member,
Is it Adjournment?
I built that.
Councilmember Henderson.
Thank you. I just have a couple of questions. The permit, the notification process, is it for an initial code enforcement? Is there a notice placed on the door, or do you put it in the mail?
I will let Keith and JC address that.
So when a notice of violation is what you're referring to, it is a piece of paper, and we post the property. That's our way of showing the court that we gave them we notified them of the violation. Typically, you get 21 days. Your lawn's 2 feet high, please mow it. We post it, and then it has our phone number on if they have any questions.
How do you post it?
You stick it right on the front door.
With what, tape?
Yes, and there's posting, and then you take a picture to put it in the record that we posted the property.
Oh, okay.
If you can't get to the property, you can put it out on the fence. Sometimes we can put a sign out there and put it on the sign. But it's a piece of paper. It's not a whole sticker that, we don't ruin their door or anything if that's.
No,
No.
that's not I just was asking a question.
We post it, and then we mail them, after the posting, they get a certified letter, the owner of record gets a certified letter also.
Immediately after the posting?
They initiate it, the posting is first, but if it's vacant, they may not see it. And then the administrative staff mails the letter.
Immediately?
That process starts, so it's within a day or 2 that it gets mailed. But it's well before the 21 days.
A certified letter that has to be signed, or it's actually
It's certified.
pay the
Yeah.
postage for that? Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah. And if there becomes an issue that someone somehow didn't, we work with everyone, because we want compliance. We're not just gonna, if you didn't get your letter and we can establish that, we give you more time. The goal is compliance. We work with everyone who calls us. It's the people who ignore us and we never hear from that usually these processes get to the point sometimes that a bulldozer shows up.
Understood. And the second question is about buildings being built without permits. That's just incredible to me. You showed a picture of a 2021 structure. Can you give us some more information about what happened in that particular instance?
J.C. Hutchison, Construction Service Center Manager. Typically, that one was kind of, unfortunately, 2021, so it was kind of during COVID. People kind of assumed they had a little bit more latitude than they thought they did. Sometimes when we deal with these owners, kind of as Keith said, we're trying to work with everybody. Sometimes that owner is trusting that contractor came to see us, got the permit, got all the documentation, so he's assuming everything's ready to go. We show up and we see a 2-story warehouse and there's no permit for it. There's nothing, not even an application submitted. So trying to then salvage what's there, because as we mentioned, we don't want necessarily to come in and have to make them tear the whole structure down, but talking about setbacks, trees that have been eliminated, stormwater, flooding, we have to take all that into consideration for a compliant structure. So that one's kind of been an elongated, that's probably one of the extremes. Usually we don't get that is the extreme, but that was the reason why we brought it to the presentation. But We're still working with that clientele. They have not occupied it. That's where the fencing is still up, so nobody's allowed to use it. So, but it's just trying to figure out what they can salvage of the existing project and what they may have to remove or what they may have to relocate.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. If there are no further questions, I will go to public comment. If anybody wishes to speak, please come up. Yes, ma'am, please state your name. Good morning.
Council. Julie McGill, real estate broker and general contractor. There's a lot of moving parts here. I don't think I can do this in 3 minutes to respond to everything. I'm going to start with the real estate part of it. The two required documents to go with the FAR-BAR contract are the seller's disclosure and a lead-based paint. Seller's disclosure is about a 3-page document, and it's a yes, no, or I don't know answer. When you have somebody that's bought a house maybe 3 years ago, and stuff was done 7 years ago, and they're asking questions that these people don't know, they're gonna check I don't know. So that eliminates that, oh, I'm gonna go after the real estate agent, or I'm gonna go after the homeowner because there was something done that they weren't aware of. They're checking, I don't know. Second of all, when you're talking about all these things, somebody bought a house, they got cited for something that they've driven by and seen, which should only be on the exterior, by the way, because I have a video that states they're not gonna cite interior remodels that they did not see with their eyes, according to Zillow and stuff like that. They said they would stop doing that. So when you're talking about exterior remodels, there's a statute of limitations that our governor signed on April 4th of last year. It's State Bill 630, reduced it to 7 years. So that kind of makes a lot of this stuff that's 10 and 15 years go away. I don't know why we're even talking about stuff that's over 7 years. So there's just, that's like I said, there's just so many moving parts. I don't think I can do this in 3 minutes, but as a contractor, I'm fully aware that illegal construction should be cited, okay? I don't believe that someone has the ability to sit in a car and see inside someone's house and cite them for an illegal interior remodel, which continued to happen until just recently. But you still have that percentage of people that you were looking at that still are in process with the same stuff, and they've been asked for it. Architectural drawings, structural engineer, they think a wall was taken down, but what if that was taken down more than 7 years ago? There we go. So where are we stopping the statute of limitations? I just have a lot of more questions, and I'm hoping that maybe we can continue this where I might get more than 3 minutes to respond to it. They're penalizing new owners that just bought the property, that went through all their due diligence, that had a home inspection, and the real estate agent, to try to put that responsibility on them to try to find out if permits were pulled, when they can't even tell maybe an interior wall was taken down. This is just a mess. I mean, I don't know if you can see my point, but it's putting more responsibility on real estate agents and title companies than is necessary, in my opinion. Trespassing, well, I know for a fact they have. How are you gonna see a back door if you haven't trespassed into that property? And many times, back doors and back windows have been cited. If they're not trespassing on the property, how would they see that? So that's a lot of my issues with this. I don't know what the answers are, but there's a lot more moving parts than what they've brought up. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Yes, ma'am. Please state your name.
Good morning, Keila McCaskill. When you guys group together, it messed us up, because to her point, it makes you have to, you want to speak to 1, 3 minutes, you want to speak to 2, 3 minutes, you want to speak to 3. But anyway, so I'm here as a real estate professional now. I believe that just like there's a lot of new buyers, there's a lot of new realtors that's approached this market. And one of the things I pride myself on as a real estate professional is someone hired me to do my due diligence to make sure that this buy is sensible. I know for sure all realtors are not familiar with a seller. They don't know. So I would definitely strongly encourage a relationship with realtors and that they educate us, or maybe a sense of a reminder because of the number of issues we're having in certain areas with this situation. So I go in and check a seller. I go in and do the due diligence. And then the second thing regarding that contract, FARBAR, I don't use FARBAR always. I use the other contract that's made by the Florida Realtors. And on that seller disclosure, most people, if they don't check, to her point, I don't know, they say I never lived there. On the form, they never filled any of it out. And so because of that, I go check permits. I go and check with the insurance companies if they have any issues. Like, I'm just checking everywhere to make sure that this buy is sensible for the client. And I even check the sellers, because I don't want to be responsible as a real estate professional to be accused of not doing my part in assisting them in this due diligence process. So I strongly encourage the relationship with the realtors. And even, I know you guys are busy, but the videos that is possible. If you and Eric, Abby and Eric does a great job of sharing information with neighborhoods. I don't know if somebody could record them sharing with people as it relates to permits. Homeowners aren't always aware that, hey, I just hired this contractor and he told me to do a builder or owner permit. You don't do that, not when you're paying them for a service, but they don't know that in most neighborhoods. So if there's some kind of way to reach out to somebody to get, maybe Eric and Abby or somebody in their department recording some information, general information to send to the neighborhoods, send to the community, so when they do order that, they may already have the information available, but somehow a video could be made or a tutorial to help them understand what that process is. And, like Rehab 101, something like that, because it's definitely not out there. And then when it comes to the code enforcement, over enforcing or under enforcing, I know along the Nebraska corridor, those code enforcement workers, if they've not told you, they are overworked, but it's not their fault. It's a homelessness problem. So as soon as code enforcement clears it, now homeless is right back into the property again, if not the same day, the very next day. So it may be seen as over enforcing, but they can't deal with homeless population. They're there for code enforcement. I don't know what the fix is, but it's not just code enforcement. It's a homelessness problem, which is out of control, and I don't know what the answer is. TPD has done a lot to send their homeless officers out there right after code enforcement. It does fix a problem. So that's all I had to say about those two things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, sir. Good morning. Please state your name.
Good morning. Victor DeMille, 1205 North Franklin Street, Suite 103. I just wanted to present to the council that I've been involved, unfortunately, with a lot of friends who have code enforcement issues. In my neighborhood, Bowman Heights in West Tampa, formed our neighborhood. In fact, I formed it myself with my neighbors because we had an ongoing problem with weather-tight windows and the fact that they park their employee cars all up and down the right-of-way on Kathleen Street. And the people, there's a few council members here who are pretty much aware of that situation. But the sad part is that we tried and tried and tried to get them to not park their cars on the right-of-way, and to this day, years and years later, they still do it. And they have two parking lots there. There's one that used to be Henry Gonzalez Plumbing before WeatherTight bought it, and they don't use it. I'd asked to put no parking on right-of-way signs, which they do around the stadium a lot, because there's no sidewalk. If there was a sidewalk there, it would clearly be a car parking on the right-of-way. When I asked to put signs up, I get a lot of legal gobbledygook that we can't do that. So unfortunately, to this day, again, we have two empty lots and parking on the street in our neighborhood. And we have a lot of loading situations where the guys come pick up their windows to go out to do installs. And we have a bus stop there for the kids in the morning. And it's a very dangerous situation. It's been going on for many years, and we've never gotten any relief on it. The second issue I wanted to bring up is the fact that, yes, there's two sides to every story. People you spoke with this morning gave a very nice presentation, but the fact of the matter is there are certain people that do get picked on by certain inspectors. And I stood right here in this place with my client, and the inspector himself has just lied through his teeth, and I put it on the record that he's lying, because we had video showing him going over the fence, which you're not supposed to do. The only relief we actually got is when we actually hired a former Tampa City attorney who knows the law inside and out and was able to combat and speak to the actual code and the laws and what they can and can't do, that we got some relief. But it still goes on even today. So, yes, there are certain people that get picked on. It's been brought up by certain members of the council, because you've been dealing with the complaints of the people who have been picked on. And I don't know what the solution to that is, except that it's been shoved under the rug, and it still goes on, and it's just an ongoing situation. And I don't have the answer for it. It's up to you to answer the questions, which you've done a very good job of this morning, but you have to continue looking at the situation and see what you can do to relieve some of this situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Councilmember Hurtak.
Thank you. So I just have a couple questions for staff. The new 7-year law, if anyone could speak to that. So if somebody takes out a load-bearing wall after 7 years, there's nothing we can do about it?
I believe the law she's referring to is that if you have an open permit that is 6 years and older, there's a process that you can now go through to then administratively close it, because it's been there that long, it's been established.
Okay.
A lot of times when we're dealing with these cases, there is no permit. There's nothing to go back to reference to.
Okay.
So then therefore, it's really hard to say, how was this corrected, how was this done without any deconstructive work? But if it is 6 years and older and you have a permit, you may have started on it and you didn't finish it, you can go back and have it administratively closed. An architect can come in and say it's structurally sound and meets building code, and we administratively close them. So we've started to go back through, even ones proactively on our side, because we're trying to get some of those permits off of our books to say, hey, these permits are 6 or 7 years old. We reach out to the owners, hoping it's still the same owner. Sometimes it's different, people have changed. But to say, hey, we do have an expired permit that is on the books. Would you like to close it? This is the procedure. We send them the section because now it's been adopted into the 2023 Florida Building Code. So we're able to cite the section. We send it right to them. And like I said, we're starting to get a slow compliance there. But you have to hire an architect. You have to hire somebody to go out there and assess it. So that's fees as well. So just trying to get some of those expired permits on. But that's due to a permit that you have initiated with us and you just didn't finish it. You forgot about it or whatever. But if it's not done and it's a violation, it's a violation.
Okay, yeah, because I was going to say that seems very scary if that were the case. And then just a statement to say that I actually went on a tour this week with a citizen who's concerned that they were being picked on by code, and looked through the entire neighborhood and took a whole drive. And I can see the concerns, but I know that staff is working to fix some of these permits. But I'm interested in also knowing, and what reminded me of the fact is the gentleman who spoke about the cars parking in the right of way. We were just on a tour, like I said, on, I think it was Wednesday and Tuesday, and there were semis parked on the right-of-way in front of a sign that said no parking on the right-of-way. So those are the kind of things that I think are frustrating. That person was frustrated because that's a very clear violation, but no one called on on his violation, but so they were just concerned that we're not citing violations for a full neighborhood. So I just wanted to make sure I put that out there.
Thank you very much. All right, item number 7. Does that complete the presentation, Ms.
Yes,
Feely?
it does.
Thank you very much. Item number 7, we have city planning staff to present the January 2024 cycle of land development code amendments. Hello, Mr. Cotton.
Morning, Council. Eric Cotton, Development Coordination. I don't have a slideshow to share with you, but I'm going to run through what's being proposed for the next January cycle.
Okay.
First is the expansion of the ADU area. So accessory dwelling units, city planning did a lot of outreach. And I will share, I think this changes it back to the areas that you see right now I'm going to say this is yellow, but it's probably not yellow, but in the yellow color is where ADUs are currently allowed. City planning did a couple of outreach programs, and they are proposing to expand it to this color that's in pink. So they did it by zip code, but that sort of overlays with the actual neighborhood associations, but it's not an exact match. That's because of the way zip codes work versus the way the city has its neighborhood associations.
Excuse me, Mr. Cotton, is that,
Yes, ma'am. I can blow it up some.
Is it, yeah, it's blur, yeah, okay, there you go, it's blurry. But it's,
So it's anywhere from Riverside Heights, so it's wrapping Seminole Heights, which is where they're allowed, and East Tampa, which is where they're now allowed. Any questions on that part?
They are allowed to do what? Say that again?
This is where the proposal to expand where ADUs would be allowed through a special use process. They still have to go through the special use
Yes.
that they currently go through now in Seminole Heights and in East Tampa and West Tampa, excuse me, not West Tampa, East Tampa and Tampa Heights. This would allow those to go through that same special use process.
Okay, so you're opening the door or
For
the
more
conversation
ADUs.
for East Tampa to have more
No,
ADUs? No.
East Tampa got it to their last.
Yellow
section.
is already.
It's
Yeah,
the pink
so
color.
we're expanding it to the purple. I'm sorry.
Oh, purple, okay.
No, because in anticipation to next Thursday's workshop regarding housing, ADUs are gonna come up, and we, just so we know what's allowable and what will be allowable, and, because these are densely populated residential areas, so.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
I do it at the end, I will. The second request is, again, dealing with accessory dwelling units. As you know, there are special uses. You have seen some of the appeals that come before council when they're administratively denied by staff. Planning staff is recommending 3 changes. One, to allow up to 2 unrelated individuals to live in the accessory dwelling unit. Right now, it's 2 related individuals. The second one is to allow the owner to reside elsewhere on site. Right now, the way the code reads, the principal building has to be owner occupied, and the accessory dwelling unit would be the rental. This would allow the accessory dwelling unit to be occupied by the property owner, and the main building could be rented out. So if I was a single individual, I could live in an accessory dwelling unit and rent my house out to a family of 4 or whatever that might be. That would be a change. And the other one, which Abby and I actually brought before council, previous council, 2 years ago, which was to allow accessory dwelling units in non-conforming structures or structures made conforming as a result of a variance. Previous council did not approve that. We're bringing it back. That would mean a existing accessory structure that's a foot from a property line when it needs to be 3 feet. Instead of having to go through the appeals process and going before council, administratively, we would be able to approve that kind of request for a special use.
Yes.
Thank you. I like all of these changes. Again, we have seen quite a few non-conforming structures, which are usually just garages, but they're old, especially in Seminole Heights area where ADUs are already allowed. People were still having to come through the process because their garage that was built in 1920 was a foot away from the property.
Correct.
So that I think is great. And I also love the change of the living situation because there are a lot of older folks that want to have a smaller footprint, but that way they don't have to sell their property to do that. They can either, live back there, like you said, and rent it out, or have family come in because those aren't the principal owner, so they couldn't legally stay in the house. And 2 unrelated people to me means just a couple can live there who aren't married. And right now, it would have to be a married couple, or a mom and a son, or a mom and a daughter, or a dad and a son, or a dad and mom, or whatever. But so I think I like those changes.
The next one is a text amendment initiated by the legal department and historic preservation. This is actually language to when a historic structure is demolished, either without permits or by neglect, having a fine associated with that demolition, or demolition by neglect, having a fine associated with that. Staff is recommending up to $15,000 fines that goes through the code enforcement process. We would be amending a couple of sections of the code, sections 27-100. Basically, the historic districts, Ybor, Seminole Heights, Tampa Heights, where historic buildings are, if they are nationally landmarked or locally landmarked, and someone lets their building, either demolishes the building or lets it get demolished by neglect, we would be able to associate a fine with that demolition.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Did you say 15? 15? That is not enough money to let someone destroy a historic structure.
I'll
Just gonna,
let Dana associate that, because that's based on Florida statute.
Hi, Dana Crosby, Collier Legal Department. Yeah, Florida statute has in Chapter 162 a fee for irreparable damage. We use it now for trees as well. And per statute, that fee is capped at $15,000. It doesn't exceed that. So what we're proposing to do is add language to our code so that we can apply that irreparable fee to this kind of destruction. But unfortunately, our fee is capped. And I agree. I
thank
agree
you
with
for that, but yeah, maybe we can lobby the legislature.
I agree.
Councilmember Clendenin.
Yeah, Councilwoman Hurtak said exactly what I was going to say. So with that restriction of the, say, legislature, can we, through ordinance, prohibit new construction on that property or increase, or is there anything else that we can do to, so we don't have that situation where somebody intentionally, by neglect or by ill will, destroys the historic district because they want to build something else?
Yes, sir. Dana Crosby Collier again. We have that for trees. If a tree is destroyed and then there is a period of, a grand tree is destroyed, and then there is a period of time before someone can build in order to use that area. I did look at that provision in our code with regard to this particular amendment, and it didn't really fit because of the language, but we can certainly look into having some period of time before they can rebuild. We just have to be
99
very
years.
cognizant of Bert Harris and other takings issues.
Right,
as
okay,
we
thank you, I
proceed.
appreciate
But
y'all
I
looking-
surely will. I'll
I'd
keep
appreciate you
looking
looking
at
into
that.
Thank you so much.
Carlson.
Yeah, I had the same questions. Anything else that we can put in, I would appreciate, especially the prohibited timeline to rebuild. Are there any other requirements we can put in? Can we put something like that they have to rebuild the structure to look similarly, or and also can we leverage code enforcement fines can we increase those in some way?
Dana Crosby Collier again. Yes, we can require them to build a structure that is identical or very similar to the structure that was demolished. In fact, you'll recall you recently did have a demo before you, and Councilmember Clendenin made the motion and stated that the new structure would be built to look like the one that had been destroyed, and in accordance with the guidelines for that historic district. So we're, at that point in time, we look at the guidelines for the historic district and how they tell us to build things, which is, of course, using original materials and other things of that nature. And then we're able to use that as we process the application for the redevelopment.
Should we ask you to come back to present other ideas that we might be able to put in ordinances, or?
As this moves through the process, the last thing we're going to discuss is the timeline. We don't have language drafted up yet, so if council gives us direction to develop that kind of language, we can work it into what we'll present to council in March.
Yeah, I would say especially for nationally registered historic buildings, we should put as many things as we can in it to save those buildings. And the city also has torn out. Remember the Bro Bowl? That the city should have been fined for that as well. I think the state came down on the city for doing that. But anyway, we need to make sure that the city also is prohibited from tearing down nationally significant, nationally registered historic buildings. So yeah, any way you can come back by ordinance or comp plan change would be great, because the community is demanding this, and there are a few outliers that want to tear down every historic building and build multifamily housing, and we need to just stop listening to them. But we need to listen to the public, and what makes the character of our community is the unique historic buildings, and also remembering our heritage and history, because it makes us so different than other cities. Thank you.
Absolutely. We will definitely look into strengthening that language. Thank you for those comments.
All right. You have a timeline, Mr. Cotton, of what's next, or you have more?
I have a couple more text
Okay.
amendments that I'll put it up on the Elmo,
Sure.
the timeline. A number of years ago, when Councilman Dingfelder was still on council, there was a text amendment that allowed front porches to extend by right in front of the structure up to 8 feet. And it was originally it was RS50 and RM. The text amendment was for RS50, RM, and PDs to allow the encroachment. The code was not amended properly per se, and per the code, it still requires, the only place that they're allowed by right is RS50, RM districts, and PDs. RS60 requires a design exception and the RM 75s and up require actually a regular variance. The intent of that code was to allow them by right in any of the zoning districts that allowed for residential development. This is just almost, not necessarily a Scrivener's error, because it's not fixing, because it wasn't a Scrivener's error, but actually clarifying that language and removing those two sections that required the design exception or the variance.
Yes.
I would specifically exclude PDs. Don't you agree?
If you want to go back and we can, that's what's currently in the code now, was to allow PDs by right.
Yeah, I think we've had an issue in figuring out how to limit PDs, and anytime there's a design exception to a PD, it defeats the purpose of having PD in the first place.
That's, just so you know, that's currently in the code. That was adopted by council the last time it went before a city.
If I could just add some context at Abby Feely. So this was for PDs that had residential approved townhomes or single family in a PD, to allow them to have a porch. If they didn't show a porch on the original PD, it allowed them to put a porch into the design without having to come back for a new PD. So in a PD right now, one of the substantial change criteria is a reduction in a perimeter setback. So if I had a townhome that did not have a porch on the front, or a house that didn't have a porch, and now I've gone in to want to have a porch, this would allow them to have the porch as long as they did not go any closer than 5 foot from the property line. If not, they would have to re-PD to get a porch. So one of the things Councilman Dingfelder at that time wanted, porches, eyes on the street, things that could happen, and not force somebody back through another 100-day process to put just a porch onto the front of a residential unit that was already approved. We have not had any of those come in to add a porch through a substantial change process. They would still have to do a substantial change process to show they were in compliance with the regulations that run with the porch, which is that no closer than 5 feet. But if, let's say on Rome Avenue, there were townhomes, they were set at 12 foot and they wanted to add an 8-foot porch, they couldn't. They could potentially add a 7, because then they'd still be at the 5, but that created that interaction along the public realm for porches and people to be there. So it is allowed now. I think what Eric's saying is it's not allowed in the RS 60 district. You still have to get a design exception, and in the RS 75, he said RM, but RS 75, RS 100, you could not do it either, and they have larger setbacks.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, yeah, I agree with Councilman Carlson, and regardless whether it's permitted now, if we're gonna redo this code, I think we need to peel back from the PD issue and not institutionalize that in our code and for these type of variances. I think when someone comes to us with the PD, everything needs to be disclosed and on that PD. They're already getting, 5 bites of an apple on a PD. We don't need to give them 6. That comes outside of the public realm and outside of our view of what this project is gonna look like. So I would actually strongly urge that y'all, when you rewrite this code, to rewrite it so that the PD is not included in that description.
Yes.
Council, I'm sorry. No, I was just thinking that rather than wait for the code, if that's council's pleasure, is coming back and they're going to be addressing that now in the changes during this cycle, if that's council's pleasure, rather than wait for it, you could ask whether it could be done, and if so, then council could direct that, if that's council's pleasure. We only hear a consensus here, but if you wish to, after taking public comment, to give sort of direction, you can do so.
Ms. Feely, I have a question for you. So I just want to make sure I understand this right. So the only time this is used in PDs is if someone already has a PD, they haven't started building yet, and they change their mind.
That is correct. The discussion came up at the time we brought this allowance, that what if I just got a PD for a house or townhomes and I didn't include a porch? Could I please also include a porch now? So we said, okay, yes, we could do that, but you have to maintain, and JC already left, but like building code, you can't be closer to 5 foot from the property line before you have to fire rate that in a different way. So we said, it was compromised that, yes, if you got a PD like that, you could add you could add those porches, but you had to remain 5 foot from the property line.
And so basically what we did is we kind of just added a grandfather-ish clause for people who had already, but now that that's already existing, we could take that away and it wouldn't make any difference, because if you're coming together with a PD, you should have that.
If your elevations, right, because they
Okay.
bring the elevations to you now, and
Okay.
if you're requesting a PD, you should be requesting
Yeah.
that. I think, I mean, the other option, listening to what you just said, you could say in the code for planned developments approved prior to July 1st of this, you would be eligible
Yeah.
or just take it out. I mean,
Yeah,
it hasn't been used, so if you want to
Yeah.
just take it out, that's fine too.
Yeah, I think we've done enough time-wise to let people who had those PDs exist already, and I think the PDs that are coming forward that want porches already have them, so I think that there's nothing wrong with taking that out.
Okay. Yes? No? Oh, you're good? Yes, sir.
And the last one, which is what we talked about with council last week, which was the Ybor parking amendments. That would be the last part of the January cycle, which would be the discussion we had last week with the PowerPoint and the change to the personnel, change to parking regulations for signage or for green space and buffering and all that. That would also be in this cycle.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Uh,
Yes, ma'am.
That's for the paid parking lots, and then we're working on the unpaid parking lots for the next cycle,
Correct.
correct?
This would be strictly for the paid parking lots, which was the
Yes.
original motion from council. And then we would go do a broader look
Okay.
at all the parking lots in Ybor.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that that was on the record. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Yes,
you very
ma'am.
much.
And just to give council
The
a
timeline?
visual of the timeline.
Yes, sir.
And let me blow this up a little bit. So today is the course of the workshop. That's what we're discussing today. We have a virtual public meeting will be scheduled on March 19th. It'll be in the CARES newsletter that goes out on March 1st. Public comment period is about a month long. In April, we'll be coming back with council with the actual language that's going to be proposed, and we'll present that probably as a staff report. Ask for your transmittal to the planning commission. We'll do a planning commission briefing. Then we'll have the planning commission public hearing. We should come back to council for first reading at night in June, for a June evening, because of the change to the special use, where it would be allowed, because it's a change to 27-156 requires a night hearing, and then hopefully in July, we would have second reading and adoption.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So July 18th, that's that first meeting we get back from the summer
Okay.
break is possibly the, okay, thank you
All right,
very much.
thank you.
Anything else in your presentation before I go to public comment?
No, sir.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Pointer.
Good morning, Stephanie Pointer. I apologize for not being here this morning and not watching while I was waiting to speak to the superintendent, but I'm kind of wondering where the design exception stuff is on this cycle, because
Mr.
we've
Cotton,
had
can you answer
meetings
that
about
question?
it and haven't seen,
Mr.
and it's
Cotton,
not here. I guess that's the only question I have. Thank you.
Can you answer the question?
Yes, sir. Eric Cotton, Development Coordination. We did have public meetings with members of both the development community and with the neighborhood groups regarding the design exceptions. That is a complicated issue, and I believe I told either Ms. Pointer or Carol Ann when I spoke with them last week or the week before, I'd rather do it right than come back to you 6 months afterwards and say, oh, we need to amend this, sort of like we did with the commercial vehicles and the size that I found out that F-150s are the same size as of a semi-truck. And the width-wise, when I found that out, that was a little bit shocking to me. So I'd rather do a deeper dive on the design exception language, get it right the first time, and then bring it back in the July cycle.
Councilman Curls.
You may have seen, we've gotten a lot of emails and calls about design exceptions. One of them that was told to me, and if we talked about this before, I've apologized, but I was told that the Ritz-Carlton project was given a bunch of design exceptions after council approved it. And one of those was that 2 additional floors were allowed. Is that accurate?
I can't speak to that because I don't know. Downtown developments go through a DDR. It's not downtown Ritz-Carlton? This is,
The Ritz-Carlton on Bay Shore is a PD. It is not eligible for design exceptions after the PD
So it's
is
not true
issued.
that staff added 2 floors?
It would have been through a substantial change if it had been approved.
But it
And I
wasn't.
am not aware of that, so, but I'm,
Okay.
I'm happy to look at the record when I get back to the office and get that information to you.
Yeah, just since we're asked a bunch of other questions, we can discuss it in another forum, but on that one, if you find out it's not true, we'll bring it up, just so the public knows. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. DeMaio, please state your name, sir.
For the record, Victor DeMaio, 1205 North Franklin Street, Suite 103. The first item as far as accessory structures are concerned is interesting because I personally am for ability of residents to have accessory structures for additional, under the code now, you're allowed to do a mother-in-law apartment for your mother or something like that. But frankly, we have a huge housing crisis going on in the city of Tampa. I know, if you know anything about West Tampa or East Tampa, anybody who had a house with a garage, the garage immediately closed in and made an apartment out of. It's been going on. My grandmother built the Old Glory Grocery in 1950 on the corner of Havana and Tampa Bay, which is now Arcoitas Restaurant. And throughout that whole neighborhood, she bought a house 2 blocks away, closer to St. Joe's, which didn't exist at the time. And she made 5 apartments out of 1 house. This was 1950. There's no code enforcement. There's no rules or regulations. She just did it. And they're there even today. And so she's allowing 5 people to rent a place for under $1,000 a month, a nice clean with a restroom and a kitchen, the whole 9 yards. So there are opportunities out there all throughout the whole city where we can increase housing. We talk about density and so forth. So for public transportation and to allow people to live in a nice structure. That's walkable and things like that. The only way that's going to happen is if you loosen the opportunities for people to have accessories. Even in my own neighborhood, in Bowman Heights, we probably a third of all the houses have closed in their garages and made apartments. And half of the people have gone to city council, got approval to continue on because they've been there as an apartment for 30, 40 years. And other people didn't want to go through the expense and the hassle because it is very expensive to go through the whole process of getting the permits and coming to city council. You're talking about, I'm doing St. Joseph Catholic Church right now. They're adding, it was a PD for the church and the school. Their church is 120 years old. So they're adding a 300 square foot bathroom. I had to go through the entire design exception, what was the process of it? And substantial change for a PD, for a toilet, for St. Joseph. It's costing the church and the diocese of St. Petersburg, thousands of dollars to add a bathroom. So these are exceptions that you have to think about when you tweak the rules that people have to go through. So I just want to throw that out there because, we have our city's 150 years old. It has a lot of nicks and crannies that you have to consider, and people that live here. So I wanted to offer those examples for real life examples for you to think about when you make those changes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cotton, do you need any direction from us, or do we wait for you to go through the process and come back in July?
No, sir. We have what council recommended regarding the PDs, the special use and such. We will be back we'll have our public meetings in March. We'll be back in April with the language for the actual code language.
Okay.
For the transmittal to the planning commission.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate the presentation.
It's 11:06.
It's a record.
And that concludes our workshop. Mr. Shelby, did I miss anything before I go to new business? No? Councilmember Miranda, do you have new business?
No, I just want to give a shout out to these good people in the Preservation Roundtable that Linda Salcena sent it, I would imagine it was her, to Craig Smith, Carlos Afonso, and Luis Martinez for working with the enhancement team. They've been working diligently in the neighborhood and River Heights, and they took out a big tire and cleaned up an alley, and they've done some work there. I just want to give them a shout out to say thank you to them.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Vieira.
Yes, sir. I got a request from Tampa Police Department that the following reports be continued from the March 28th agenda to April 18th. April 4th is an option if needed. It was number 1, administration to report on ideas how to combat violent crime throughout the city, and then for TPD and TFR to present the annual report on the public safety master plan. I guess they came to me because I made both of those. I'm okay with that if council is. April 4th or April 18th.
Second.
Let's do April 18th. Give a little bit of time.
That's a good day. We have a motion from Councilmember Vieira, second from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Anything else, sir?
Yes, sir. Also got a request from Regina Castillo. The city of Tampa is beginning that new program of internships for individuals with intellectual disabilities, and she wanted to come and speak on it briefly, probably like 5 minutes, on the March 28th agenda, if she may.
We have a motion from Councilmember Vieira, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Then lastly, if I may, I had sent out a memo on the Racial Reconciliation Committee, and it's kind of consistent with what I talked about at council last week. And you know, we can talk on it, and the sections. I've talked to a number of people in the community on this, et cetera, including Mr. Hirsch, who pushed us on this issue. And I mean, what I suggest we do is to, and of course we can talk about the sections, again, like I said, this is the 10 suggestions, not the 10 commandments, is that we do a vote, again, if council is supportive of it, supporting the idea, and then requesting that the administration get back with us on their position on it, and that's it.
I read your memo, and I'm happy to support it. I think you did your due diligence and the different talking points, and I know the resolution that was brought forth by a previous council member back in the fall of 2020. You know, members of the public have requested this commission. You know, we can explore it, and I'd be happy to support it. So.
And may I? Oh,
yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yeah, I commend you as well for, and because I agree, and I think that it's something that we probably need to pull the administration in to get their buy-in and support, because we know how this process works. I think the intent is really well thought out. I think your points were really well thought out, and I appreciate you pushing this agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurtak.
I just want to say I agree. Thank you for the memo. Thank you for getting this started, or rather going forward with it after our last conversation. That seemed to be what we needed to do next, was to meet with the administration and see what the next steps would be. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carlson.
Yeah, just in the public comment about this, we haven't talked about it that much, but I will say that, you know, what the resolution says is that we would support a commission, not that we would create one, and it was created by Councilmember Goods, who then was pushed out of the city, and so that's why nothing happened after that, and so the implication in some of the public comment is that we haven't done anything to help the African American community or East Tampa, and we know the opposite of that, and so I don't want any implication to be that this committee is going to solve all issues, because we deal with these issues all the time, and we have for the 5 years that I've been on council. The other thing is, I think that the agenda items that you suggest would be a good starting point, but what I would recommend is that you ask the committee to decide what they think the agenda should be, and then they can address it. And I want to remind the public and everyone, 4 years ago, I proposed and you all supported the creation of an economic advisory committee that was supported by USF and data, and the data for that is online. You can Google Tampa Economic Advisory Committee, and the administration didn't do anything with the data. And so I'm not very hopeful that anything will come of this. We've had a struggle being able to implement things, and so the issue is not that we're not aware of issues and that we don't want to do things, it's that we're having a hard time implementing it. And I don't remember exactly what the charter says anymore about creation of committees, you know, with all the fights that have gone over the years. For the peace and goodwill, it's good to get advice, but I think anytime we set up a committee or we suggest setting up a committee, it should at a minimum have one appointee from each city council member to make sure that we reflect the diversity that we see in the community. Any committee that we set up that does not have one, then it ends up not representing the community. We will make sure individually that we're filling in the gaps on what we see in the community. And so if you, in discussion with the administration, if they want to add people, fine, but we should have at least one for each city council member. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Vieira, so you're going to take the lead on this?
Yes, sir. So a couple of things. I did I don't recall who first mentioned Councilman Goods. I did not mention him in the first one. I'm always about giving people credit, and he obviously brought this up a couple of, I guess, 4 years ago, so I do want to mention that. I think that's very, very important where credit is due. And with regards to the idea that we're going to, solve all issues, et cetera, obviously this isn't going to do this. I highlighted a number of issues, some of which have been addressed in a robust way, some of which haven't gotten there yet. We have a number of years where we can do that. And for the record, in going through these issues, I've spoken with Toba. I'm also meeting with Toba on this again soon. The Urban League, Daryl Hirsch, Florida Rising, Robin Lockett, among other individuals in the community, because obviously I wanted to make sure that I got input before going there. And Councilman Carlson brings up the membership. My personal feeling was that we should have 7 from council, with each council member proposing 1. Maybe we get some from the administration, 6, whatever it may be, again, to be considered. And then maybe we could have a seat, whatever the number would be for, Urban League, NAACP, whatever it may be. Again, talking off the cuff. So I don't know if anybody else wished to speak before I make the motion.
Councilmember Henderson.
Yes, thank you. Attorney Shelby, can you speak to Resolution 568 and explain to the public how it was drafted, who drafted it, where did the language come from before it was approved by the previous city council members?
Yes, I was approached by Councilman Goods with model language, and he and I worked together to, in my understanding of what council's process would be and what council wished to do, and what he ultimately wished to have presented to council, and that's what was brought forth with his
Okay,
approval.
so you drafted it and with the previous council member Goods, and then it was presented to the board.
Yeah.
So then speak on Section 3 in terms of what I said last week, and now Councilmember Carlson also stated regarding Section 3, indicating that we would support the creation of ideas coming to us, that we would support that or be in favor of supporting that as it relates to a committee. Does it say anything about us creating a committee?
No, specifically, it does say the word support as opposed to the word create, and part of that was council's role as the legislative body of the city, where you have the mayor as the chief administrator. And what came upon at the time was, for instance, the way the Charter Review Commission was structured, with the full participation of the administration, and also the support that was necessary to have a Charter Review Commission, as opposed, let's say, to council's experience with the council creating the budget, Citizens Budget and Advisory Committee, and the lack of, let's say, for instance, administrative support for that, and the fact that it was council's responsibility, and the council certainly did not have the budget or the staffing to be able to really effectuate it until we were able to, and council did that, seek the clerk to get more involved. So with the structure of the city the way it was, that was put forth to council in a way that would be able to express what council's desire was, and then perhaps then move forward in some form or fashion down the road to be able to see what could be done to have a committee that council could support. Does that answer your question?
Somewhat, yes. My last question is, when it's stated that we will work with staff regarding Resolution 568 that was stated up here just a few moments ago, what does that mean in terms of this council? How would that go about? What staff are we talking about? Who would this board work with regarding Resolution 568? Is that direct communication with the mayor? Because she didn't sign off on Resolution 568. That was a council member, council decision. So what would be the responsibility of staff regarding this resolution? And when we say work with them, who are we talking about? And that could be for anybody on the dais or our attorney.
May I? Yes. The details are to be developed, and that's why I'm going to make the motion to, work with the administration and to have them come back on their ideas and their position on this. Yeah, so that hasn't been fleshed out yet. Really, the way I'm not going to get into how I would envision it because that would be futile at this point. But I have the way I would envision it, right? But in terms of the procedure on it, there's obviously more dialogue that's needed on this. But I think if we, set the ship sailing right now, we send it off to the administration and have them come back to us in a few weeks with their position, and we finalize it, we can get this thing sailing, in my opinion.
So are you saying send it to the mayor's office? When you say you're sending it to them, what are you sending it to them specifically?
A request, my motion will be a request for the administration to report to us on their position on this committee, and the proposals made in this memo. And again, if council has any amendments, either now or later that you want to add, please.
Yeah. Do you have a date for them to come back?
So I was looking at the dates, March 28th would likely, I don't know.
That's fine. No, March 7th is very busy,
Yes.
so March 28th.
28th is also full.
Okay, so let's do, how about the next week?
April 4th is good.
There you go, April 4th.
All right, and in the meantime, we can also brainstorm our own ideas, so when they come back, we can rebut, we can
Absolutely.
add, we can. All right,
Yes.
we have a motion, do we have a second?
Second.
Second from Councilmember Clendenin, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councilmember Carlson?
Yeah, two things real fast. One, Councilmember Henderson, I made a statement a minute ago about former Councilmember Goods, and I forgot to mention you duly won the election, so congratulations, and didn't mean to not misrepresent that. Number two is, to this point, Councilmember Vieira, one of my suggestions was that you define, just use those points as a starting point and then ask them what they think they should measure. And they might start with the stuff from the Economic Advisory Committee also, because there's a lot of data that USF worked on there. That was a big group of diverse people meeting 6 times. The other thing, though, is having served on the Charter Review Commission, there was a lot of discussion and confusion about what we were supposed to do. And we had instructions from City Council, but there still was argument, discussion about it. What we might want to do, just a suggestion, as a first step, is once the committee is appointed, we might want to add them to the workshop list and just have a discussion with them before they start about expectations. Because the one thing I'm worried about, especially with the experience with the last one, there was high expectations for how things would change, and then nothing really happened. And so we need to talk about, first of all, what everybody thinks should be included and discussed, how it will be measured, but then at the end, it's all about how you turn it into policy and resources, and so we need to have that discussion.
Fair enough. All right, thank you very much. So that'll be coming back April 4th.
Yes, sir.
That was a unanimous yes vote. Councilmember Henderson, do you have any new business?
I do not.
Councilmember Clendenin?
Just a couple of comments. One, mostly just thanking people. Thank you, Councilman Vieira, for, once again, for pushing this forward. I think it's clear to anybody that lives in not just the city of Tampa, but our society, knowing that we have systemic issues that we need to address. And I think that pursuing this agenda is something that's very helpful for the community, very helpful for citizens that live in the city of Tampa, and will be helpful for the city government. So I urge the administration to jump on board and help us push forward with this agenda. And again, once again, thank you, Councilman Ferrer, for bringing this forward and with something that's concrete that we can actually act on. Because I know we have had a lot of discussion, but it's nice to actually have something concrete that we can work with. On the city staff, I know a lot of work went put into this presentation today, and I want to thank them, the land development, code enforcement, legal staff, and that I think they did a great job today, and I really commend the presentation. I know when we sometimes ask for work from staff, they'll come forward, it takes us 30 seconds to ask for something, and it takes them weeks to prepare and react to what we do. And it was evident in the type of information they provided today, and I think it's something because we've heard these issues come before council so many times, and it's nice to have this type of presentation that answers those questions. So I really appreciate staff in doing that. And the other thing is I want to thank everybody that's reached out to me this past week. I've gotten overwhelming love and support, and I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Hurtak.
Yes, no actual business, but I would like everyone to look at the March 7th calendar. We have 3 commendations. We have 2 continued review hearings, a new review hearing, and then 13 staff reports. and unfinished business. We will be here all night. So I'm just gonna ask that, if staff has stuff that they need to continue, let us know as soon as possible. And then otherwise, if there's something you see on here that you don't want anymore, that needs to go away, I just think it's a good idea that we just take a quick peek. Again, doesn't have to be right now, but I'm just gonna recommend that you do that because this is gonna be a really long day otherwise.
I love being here.
I do too, but.
Liar, liar, liar.
But, you know, we are really trying to get to 10 items per session, and so we're at 13, plus these review hearings and the commendation. It's just, I don't know. So.
I was gonna go see my mom for lunch, but I said, I'm gonna stay at City Hall till tonight. And I'm committed. Councilmember Clendon, you want to add something before I go to Councilmember?
I forgot to remind everybody, budget analyst position.
Yes.
We received the questionnaires from the 12 applicants. All those questionnaires, everybody here should have received those. We're expecting everybody to have ranked 1 through 12, those by Friday. And then once those rankings are received, staff is going to compile to get us to our interview list. I just wanted to remind everybody to submit those.
I'm gonna submit those by this afternoon, so.
Thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Carlson.
Yeah, I have a few, if you all will, just from things that have come up. I was supposed to have Dr. Shivandu speak today, and he and his team need more time to dig into numbers and everything, but that could have been a prelude to the housing discussion next week. I think that we ought to put a 15 to 30 minute discussion at the beginning of the workshop next week to talk about what our goals are, because we get thrown all kinds of numbers, but we don't have consensus about what we think the goals are. The mayor, for example, set a goal of 10,000 homes. I've talked about the home ownership rate. We could try to tie it back to median household income or per capita income, something like that. I think we need a discussion at the beginning of the meeting to talk about what our goals are before we have all the other discussions, because we need to be able to guide those discussions by what we think the goals are. And I think they should be outcome oriented, not output. It's not how many grants we process, it's how we're moving some of the bigger numbers. So I would like to make a motion to add an agenda item for the beginning of the housing workshop next week, for the chair to lead a discussion and build consensus as to the outcome goals that council has related to housing.
Okay. We have a motion from Councilmember Carlson, second Councilmember Vieira. All in favor?
Aye.
I wanted to speak on the motion.
Me too. Councilmember Hurtak.
Thank
No,
you.
I can say it after.
No, the only thing I'm concerned about is we don't know what's coming, and I'll be honest, I think that's a much longer discussion than 15 to 30 minutes. So the only thing I might add is if each of us comes with 3 goals, just so we're not starting from scratch.
Okay.
Is that a good amendment?
Yeah, and we could just do that anyway, but the idea is that we're the ones that set the policy, so we should drive the agenda instead of just hearing whatever staff presents. And it may be that we'll all agree, but at least it gives us a chance to put on the table some of our ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, my concern is, in regarding the whole housing discussion, is how do we combat the large corporations and investors that come in with cash and buy stuff up and turn them into rental properties, and therefore defeating the purpose of single-family home ownership, which is the path to the American dream, in my opinion. We get a lot of passionate public comment, and people are right. There is a major housing crisis in the city of Tampa that I've never seen in my lifetime. You wanted to buy a house in West Tampa for as long as I can remember, and I'm, Councilman Moreno, you bought your house, years before, but $110,000 for my time through high school and college, you can get a house in West Tampa on Ohio Street, on Woodlawn. And it was always like that. You wanted a 3,000 square foot home, $130,000. Maybe a swimming pool, $140,000. Now those houses, because one was my grandmother's house on Osborne in Armenia. They sold that house in 1997 for about $130,000. 3,000 square feet with a swimming pool. I wish I could buy it today. I learned how to swim in that pool. I learned how to tie my shoes there, whatever. That house on Zillow, I think, is at $800,000 or $850,000. How? In working class, middle class West Tampa, where a lot of the people that were there when I was a kid, they're still there today. But they bought their houses for a lot less. It's crazy. But then we talk about, you know, BlackRock, Blackstone, all these other corporations that are coming in, and it's like turning them into Airbnb properties, rental properties, and they're killing the American dream and creating a rental society. I want to know, and I'm looking forward to this discussion, is how do we've committed millions of dollars, okay, for housing, for rental assistance, for down payment assistance. We're trying to fight these big corporations that basically yes, it's a free market, but it's unfair. You know, we're trying to do what we can as a council. I know we're looking at the code, at land use, as accessory dwelling units. I mean, we're in a major battle here because and on top of that, we have so many new people moving here. You know, so we need to do what we can in order to combat this. Yes, ma'am.
I agree, and that's why I'm looking for it, and I'm hoping there's a discussion on community land trust, because the only way to control that is to control the land.
Yep. Councilmember Clendenin.
I'll disagree, but you already know that. I think that, you know, Mr. Chairman, if I hear you right, it's just a lot of what we do is the proverbial drop in the bucket. We're faced with such overwhelming pressures on, you know, these other issues. Some of this could be fixed by the state of Florida legislature if they chose to. Obviously, they're not, and they haven't taken action. I don't necessarily know that the city of Tampa can do that. I think we have to kind of focus on who do we represent. We represent the people that currently live in the city of Tampa.
Yep.
And we should be taking care of the people that currently live in the city of Tampa. Number one, the citizens of the city of Tampa should be our number one in our focus. And a lot of this when we talk about housing, some of my frustration and some of maybe some of the disagreements focused on council is what we see as the solution to that. To me, the solution is ensuring that people don't get evicted from their houses, ensuring that folks, the elderly, is able to maintain their house so they can stay in their house, so that we do that. Getting that down payment assistance. We have a member of council today that, you know, was part of a mayor's challenge fund that got into a home because of the City of Tampa program. We need to double down on those types of programs that work and really not chase something. You know, my opinion about what we're doing, we're spending literally hundreds of millions of dollars. And it is again, the drop in the bucket, and it's not reaching in the way we would want to or intended to reach to the actual people that are currently living in the city. And with, I think, that amount of money, we can make really significant gains for folks by doubling down, again, on rent assistance, by doubling down on down payment assistance, by helping people fix their houses, helping people put roofs on their houses. You know, the Paint Your Heart Out Tampa, one of our speakers today is doing an event, and our public comment is doing an event. That was something that I participated in with my son was like 5 years old, and we went out and did Paint Your Heart Out Tampa. We did that together years ago, and have done so subsequently to that as well. So that's what I look at as a vision for the city of Tampa. Let's take care of the people that are living here, and then of course, you know, we have responsibility to grow smart and to do what we need to do. But number one is the people that live in the city of Tampa today.
Yep, Councilman Carlson.
So did we vote on this, or do we need to vote?
Yeah,
Okay.
you're good.
Yeah, just to finish on that thought, an example based on what Councilmember Clendenin just said is, if you think about Paint Your Heart Out, an output would be, you know, how many houses we painted. Outcome would be how many people retain their homes, or what the home ownership rate is. Yep. So what the question is, in the whole day of discussion, how are we going to measure success? And we don't often know how we're going to measure success, so that's why. The second one I have is, the biggest question I get is, why are our roads in such bad shape? And I talk to Vic almost every day and his team, and so this is not a ding on them, but just for the public, I think we should have quarterly updates, 5-minute quarterly updates like we do with DOT, just about the status of road repair. And so I'd like to make a motion to ask Mobility to give a 5-minute quarterly update starting April 18th as to what roads are being repaired, what roads are planned to be repaired, and an update on the status of the road repair budget.
We have a motion from Councilman Carlson, second from Councilman Miranda. I'm glad you brought that up.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
I was at the night parade on the parade route. I'm giving beads, as we do, and a lady goes, "Guido, what are you gonna do about the roads?" During the parade, and I stopped right there. So I had a conversation with her as the car kept going. No, well, yeah, as the car kept going with my wife in the back, I had to chase the car. And I said, we tripled the paving budget. in the last budget that we voted on, we tripled that paving budget, remember that? You know, and that's thanks to council and the hard work with the finance department and everything. People want their roads paved. You know, many of us supported the offer transportation initiatives that would help us generate that income to get the roads paved. I think that's great because people ask this every day. What are you gonna do about the roads are terrible in South Tampa, Habana's terrible. I mean, I can make a list off the top of my head, but people stop me regularly. They just want the roads paved.
If they don't see their roads getting paved, if we at least show them some roads are getting paved and why, what the
Yeah.
priority is. Did we vote? We didn't vote on
No,
it.
no, no. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The second, Miranda was the second.
Another one is, we were just talking about design exceptions. We've gotten a flood of emails about that. I know we've had other discussions before. If you think we've had enough, just vote no. But I would like to make a motion to add a discussion to the May 23rd workshop as to how and why design exceptions are made to projects after city council has approved rezoning.
We have a motion from Councilmember Carlson. Do we have a second?
We are bringing that back for the the next cycle, correct? Is design exceptions gonna be part of it? Yeah, the July cycle, right?
Yes, but his question is different.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Is that a second for you?
Yeah, I'll second it, yeah.
Okay,
'cause
so
I
second
agree.
from Councilmember Clendenin. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Anything else, sir?
Yeah, another one, and this is not a ding on anybody, it's just a question. A lot of people in the public are asking me, why are all these PIO positions being advertised and they're all above 100,000? And I just want to see what the relation is to how the communication department has grown in the PI positions related to the budget. As we're getting ready to go into budget season, we need to know that. But there are a lot of questions about the cost of it. So I'd like to make a motion to ask the CFO to report on April 18th as to the status of the budget for the communication department and the new PIOs.
How many PIOs are there? You said a lot.
There's a police, there's a fire, there's the city mayor's office.
They're for each department.
Yeah.
I think it's a good idea to communicate more, but I just want to know in relation to the budget, how we're doing. That's the question.
$100,000 seems like a lot. But
Yeah. Councilmember Carlson has a motion, second from Councilmember Hurtak, correct?
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. One last one. We had access to this a year ago, and then we stopped, and I don't think we ever made a motion about it, but the city now uses GovQA for public records, and for a while, several of us were getting weekly reports on all the public records requests being made, and it's available to the public. You can pull public records, which I have done occasionally, but it would be easier if we just got monthly reports on it. And all it's doing is telling us what public records requests have been made, just so we know. Sometimes there are even public records requests made about us that we don't know for some time. And it just gives us a line of sight into what's happening. And also, we see if they're fulfilled. So I'd like to make a motion to ask city staff to provide council with a monthly written report, not in front of council, but just a written report as to the public records requests that have been made and fulfilled in the city and/or fulfilled in the city for the prior month.
Motion from
But don't
Council.
you know that they're requesting public records on you? Thank you, Hurtak.
If they request.
You don't always know. Okay, because I had one recently and I was just wondering, I mean, that was my first time being asked, someone asking for public records. They ask you, have you,
When we got them weekly, sometimes we would see them before
Okay.
we're notified of them. Monthly, we might not get that. But if somebody pulled a public records request on you, or any of us, it would be interesting to find out what people are pulling public records about. And what people are pulling it's just a line of sight into what's going on in and around the city. And it's all publicly available. We can get it by public records request, but it's just easier if we get a report on it.
yeah, and what are the records? It's just email and?
No.
What is it?
A public record, I'm sorry, Martin Shelby, City Council Attorney. A public record could be anything that was made, created to memorialize, communicate, or formalize knowledge. So it could relate to City Council, but if it doesn't relate to specifically your personal phone or your letters that came into your office, they could still be fulfilled without you necessarily knowing about it if the city is able to get the information on its own, on its own servers.
Councilmember Carlson has a motion, second from Councilmember Miranda. All in favor? Wait, Councilmember Clendenin.
Yeah, I know we did discuss this one time before when I first got on, right? And I believe Mrs. Elman came and I think they had an issue at that time. There was a new person in the position.
It was a staff.
But that's been fixed. Okay.
And also, it could be what the platform perhaps doesn't presently allow, but with a module perhaps could be made to allow. Because, for instance, from my perspective, I found it very useful as your attorney to know what was being requested, particularly if it involved city council, particularly, let's say, if it involved a particular parcel of land, because that indicated that somebody might be wanting to do something, especially if it was somehow related to a rezoning. So it was helpful for me to get a lens on what is being requested by the public.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Carlson has a motion, second Councilmember Miranda, all in favor?
Aye.
Anything else?
Nope, thank you.
All right, I just want to let folks know that on the first floor, there's a display in regards to Black History Month. It's open to the public. Just if the door is locked or not open by any chance, just let the security guard know, and you can see it down there. A lot of folks put a lot of effort into it, and it's downstairs on the first floor. I don't, is this in the Sister Cities room or in the mascot room? I'm sorry. We have the displays in there. So that's it. Motion to receive and file. We have a motion from Councilmember Miranda, second from Councilmember Vieira. All in favor? Aye. All right. We will be back at 5:01 p.m.